Hello everyone! For the first ever public live stream on my main channel, I am really excited to talk to you today about Senko Hanabi and reveal some of my secrets for making these very special Japanese sparklers. These are perhaps, actually most probably, they are the only fireworks in the world that are safe and legal for almost anyone to make themselves. I have made several variations of these sparklers in the past, but if you've followed my channel for some time, you have only ever seen this type, made with a paper stem, and these are incredibly difficult to make. But fortunately, that's what makes them fun. The challenge of putting these sparklers together is a true art. I am really excited to be on here live with you all. This is, like I said, the first time I have ever gone live on my main channel. I have a rough script for this video, not really a script, but an outline that I'd like to follow. In the meantime, I will be trying to keep up with some of the comments and answer questions, but this, I hope, will be a true masterclass for Senko Hanabi. There is a second variation besides this paper-stemmed version, which I have never shown how to make before, and we will be digging into that later in the video. First of all, I would like to talk a little bit about my history with these very special sparklers. I have been trying to make these things for about 20 years now, and I want to show you one of the first attempts that I ever made at these sparklers. This is the first success that I ever had. As you can see, they are quite a mess. Rolled out of party streamers, as I recall. These are really special sparklers. You can see that there is a drip, a molten drop of liquid on the end of this stem of paper. And I'm having to blow on this sparkler. This is a very rough version of just I had only ever seen these sparklers in person I had never seen them in person except for like photocopies on the internet, like rough drawings and sketches. They are extremely rare, only found in Japan. The only reason anyone might have seen them before prior to, well, really my first videos on the subject were if you followed niche fireworks forums or if you were into anime. I did not actually see these in anime, but I was told after the fact that this is a common sparkler in anime because, of course, this is the traditional sparkler of Japan. Now, one of the things that's so special about these, besides the amount of skill that's required to make them, is, let me show you a standard sparkler here. So, if you take a look at this ordinary wire-stemmed sparkler, there is a coating of pyrotechnic composition on the outside of the wire. And as the sparkler burns down, you can see flame throwing those sparks off. Now, that flame is caused by a combustion reaction in the sparkler, which is what makes fireworks so dangerous. So when you are igniting a firework, if you remember the fire triangle from grade school, or I guess early high school, you start with heat, and then you also need fuel and oxygen. Well, a pyrotechnic composition has the fuel and the oxygen both inside of it at the same time. The actual powdered composition contains oxygen, and so it doesn't require an external oxygen source to burn like an ordinary fire would. That makes a pyrotechnic composition very, very dangerous because you can't easily put it out. It contains all the ingredients necessary for a fire besides heat. You just have to add a spark, and it will burn on by itself for a very long time, and you can't put it out by smothering it or any other means that you would ordinarily use for putting out a fire. Now, if we go on to look at a close-up of a Senko Hanabi, you'll notice something a little bit different compared to a traditional wire sparkler that we would be used to in the US. Notice how there is no flame on this sparkler. It's just a molten drop that is vaguely glowing orange, but there's really nothing else going on. There's no jets of fire. It's just a molten drop. And I want to now actually ignite another one of these sparklers. So if we put this one up here, and we will ignite this, I want you to watch it very carefully. So we see an initial combustion reaction. So this sparkler right here actually does have the oxygen contained in the composition. This is a traditional Japanese Senko Hanabi made in the normal way. But notice now that all of the powder has burned before it actually started giving off these sparks. There is no composition, no pyrotechnic powder contained in this stem as it's burning upward. And this is one of the things that really attracted my interest to these sparklers. How in the world do these things work without containing any pyrotechnic composition in the part that's actually burning? I mean, look at that thing. It's just burning up the stem and throwing off these little tiny sparks. That is very weird, very, very different than any other fireworks in the world. Now, the way that these actually work, it's actually very, very interesting here. I want to pull up another clip for you, and I think you will recognize. What this is. So here I have a glass of seltzer water. And look at how it throws those drops off of the surface. If you've ever drank ginger ale and had like that funny feeling in your nose, I know a lot of people don't like ginger ale at all because of those drops shooting up their nose. This is the same effect that creates sparks in a Senko Hanabi. It's less of a combustion reaction and more of just like boiling, like the liquid on the surface of the sparkler is just throwing off these tiny little droplets in the same way as seltzer water. I just love this effect, and it just explains so many of the properties of other sparks. I have a whole video on my channel about why sparks branch, and I experiment and explore some of the properties of Senko Hanabi that reveal why things like metal sparks will branch, and it won't just be one. You often see sparks where they go out and then they explode. And why does that happen? Well, Senko Hanabi really reveal a lot of the secrets of this. When we see the seltzer water effect, it reveals that when we look at the surface of the Senko Hanabi, you see the same bubbling action, and then you can expand this effect to look at the individual drops that are actually thrown off of the sparkler. If you followed these drops with a slow motion camera, as has been done before by some scientific papers, you find that the tinier drop itself will then continue to branch, continue to throw off more of these tiny little liquid droplets, and it does so quickly that it looks like the sparks are exploding, but really they're liquid drops that are just shooting drops off in all different directions, and at normal speed to our human eye, it just looks like an explosion of these sparks. All right, let me check my notes here and see where we want to go from here. And I want to try to monitor some of the comments as I am doing this, because that's some of the fun of a live stream. Yeah, someone talked about the pollution that fireworks make. That is one of the reasons why I like these Senko Hanabi sparklers, is they contain basically none of the harmful ingredients of ordinary fireworks, like the colorants and things like that could cause pollution. Although, so let me talk a little bit about my history with Senko Hanabi. So I started off, as we saw in that first clip, making a very rough version of these sparklers out of... I tried to use any paper that I could find that would work for these sparklers. These, of course, are the first ones that I was able to make successful, as we saw. But then besides this variation, I want to play an earlier clip where I was not so successful. And you will hear in my voice, this is 15 years ago, by the way, in this clip. Maybe more than 15 years ago. And you will hear a little bit of my frustration in how long I have already worked on these sparklers with no success.
Grams over Ned's composition. Come on. Now there's something.
I was actually quite excited with this.
Oh,
this very tiny result of getting a tiny dross ball to form on the end of the ash of these sparklers.
Still burning a bit quick.
Imagine being happy with results like this.
Alright, yeah. That was a failure. It was close though. I'll step up the sulfur by another half a gram.
Yeah, so that was probably attempt number 200 of making these sparklers with various compositions, trying different rolling techniques and paper. And I got stuck for a very long time attempting to make these sparklers by focusing on the type of composition that I was using and just adjusting it little by little. And eventually I had a little bit more success by rolling the paper more tightly, but I still was mainly focused on the composition. But meanwhile, I was still posting videos online, trying to show off my results so far making these sparklers, and that was noticed by a TV show in Japan, which focuses on sort of all the different Japanese crafts that are really artistic and people try to replicate all over the world. This TV show finds people that are not from Japan that are interested in these topics and brings them to meet an actual master of the craft. And for these Senko Hanabi sparklers, there are only 2 master craftsmen left in the entire world that make these sparklers. And I got to sit down for several days and learn from one of them. So right here is a clip of me learning from Ryota Tsutsui of Tsutsui Tokimasa, one of only 2 surviving firework companies in Japan that still make these traditional Japanese sparklers. And I am enormously impressed at this point as he's demonstrating that what I was missing with my sparklers was the actual performance of the sparkler is almost completely dependent on a very precise technique in rolling them. And Tsutsui-san was extremely kind in demonstrating all of his secrets for rolling these sparklers and even went as close to the camera as he could in this shot to give me something to take home and study. Meanwhile, while I was here in Japan, I rolled probably 100 or 200 of these, just trying to make the most of my time until my fingers were bleeding from rolling these sparklers. And yeah, I am extremely impressed in this moment with how consistent he is able to roll these. The length of these sparklers is only different maybe by a millimeter or so between each one. It is amazing the consistency that he has. And the rolling technique is something that we will be demonstrating later in this video. So, as we have noticed with these sparklers, all of the powder is contained in the front, this very tip that is burning currently in this shot. And forgive the airplanes, this is a live video and I cannot avoid the noise that I would usually work around as I'm filming my ordinary projects. So one of the most interesting things to notice about these sparklers is the fact that the powder completely burns before we actually get the sparking effect. And what that means, if you actually think about it carefully, is that the powder is not the important part. It's the ash that is left behind in these sparklers. So as this sparkler is burning up the stem and this molten drop is releasing sparks, it seems like we would not need an oxidizer to actually make this work, because the oxidizer was all contained in the tip of the sparkler, and now we're nowhere near the tip anymore. It is burnt down, and we're just working off of what was left behind by that initial chemical reaction. So we might be able to take a different route to create this molten ash. We don't necessarily need the extremely explosive and dangerous ingredients that are used in traditional fireworks. And so we have been able to make, that is myself and several researchers around the world, have been able to come up with a composition that works in these sparklers that is completely non-flammable. And that seems utterly impossible. How can you make a firework out of a non-flammable powder? This is actually based on potassium bicarbonate instead of an oxidizer. Now, potassium bicarbonate is the potassium version of baking soda. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. Potassium bicarbonate is just potassium instead of sodium in baking soda. And this is actually an ingredient in the highest end fire extinguishers you can buy, known as Purple K fire extinguishers. These are the kinds of extinguishers that if you were working on something like an oil rig, somewhere where you had a ton of combustible material, liquids and things around, this is the only type of fire extinguisher that is licensed to work in these extremely hazardous situations. And amazingly, this fire extinguishing ingredient can replace the oxygen providing ingredient for these sparklers. And by the way, I am really interested, as you guys are watching this video, be thinking about other ways we might be able to use this composition besides these sparklers. I would love to come up with a variety of fireworks that could be made with a non-flammable composition in this way. Let me switch over to another camera here. And we are going to take a close-up look at this powder. And forgive me, this is a live production, and so it's a little messy. And not everything goes to plan or as smoothly as I would like. But this is a container full of this pyrotechnic composition. So, I want to show you how non-flammable this is. This is a torch flame lighter. And you can see that we are getting a small amount of reaction here, but just at the surface, nothing like what you would get from an ordinary fireworks composition. In fact, this powder composition could very likely be used to put out a fire. You can see that there's a little bit of glowing surface on the front. This is a flame that is about 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, and it cannot ignite this powder in this state. Maybe you get a little bit that's still glowing at this point, but otherwise, look at that. If this were an ordinary fireworks composition, we would have gotten an explosion. Instead, we get a few glowing embers, which are slowly dying out. Absolutely amazing. I love this stuff, and it's probably one of my proudest moments to be involved in the invention of the first non-flammable firework composition. Now, a researcher out of Japan actually came up with the first variety of this, but they used a different ingredient instead of the potassium bicarbonate, which had no shelf life. This does. You can actually make these sparklers with this composition and make them in advance, and they will still be good months later. I love it. So, I mentioned that this composition uses potassium bicarbonate. Now, that is not the simplest ingredient that we can use in these sparklers. We can, in fact, use this composition's close relative, sodium bicarbonate, baking soda. We can make these sparklers with baking soda. Now, they will not be as high performing, but they're definitely worthwhile to make. And they make a really unique effect that I'm really excited to demonstrate. Now, I want to take a pause here. I need to catch my breath and read a few comments before we move on. All right. Other people are asking if other carbonates and bicarbonates would work for this reaction. The trick is finding one. Maybe I don't want to get into that. For chemistry reasons, what you need to look at when you're finding a suitable bicarbonate to work in these reactions is you need to look at the melting temperature of the sulfate of that metal. So sodium sulfate and potassium sulfate have a fairly low melting point, and so they can survive in that liquid drop. Most other bicarbonates or carbonates like strontium or barium, if you tried to use those in these sparklers, once you melt the initial composition, everything turns into sulfate and it freezes and you don't get any sparks. So sodium bicarbonate and potassium bicarbonate are the best ingredients to use. The original composition of these sparklers I have talked about in earlier videos, and because the purpose of this live stream is just the non-flammable variety, that is what I want to focus on here. I don't want to address any of the original Senko Hanabi compositions in the same video where I talk about techniques to make the non-flammable variety, because the difference in making them, you can be much more loose with certain safety aspects when making this composition than you can with a real firework, well, these are a real firework, but a firework with a combustible composition, you have to be much more careful with, and so I don't want to get things confused. Do not use the things that I demonstrate in this video for nitrate-based Senko Hanabi or any other combustible fireworks. Okay. So, what I would like to do at this point is demonstrate the initial or the basic I would like to demonstrate now the basics of putting together a composition for these sparklers. So we are going to start, by demonstrating how to make the baking soda variety of these sparklers, and I'll bring you over to my scale here. Let's bring up a image of my scale. And to make these sparklers, there are a few pieces of equipment that you will need. You will need a very precise scale. Because these sparklers take such a small amount of composition, it's good to have a scale that is accurate down to 0.001 of a gram. Because you really want to make just a few grams of this composition at once. That's more than enough. A gram of composition makes about 15 sparklers, 10 or 15 sparklers, so it doesn't take much. Now, the composition for the baking soda Senko Hanabi is this ratio here. Let me bring that up on this camera. Baking soda Senkos. That is sodium bicarbonate, 7 parts, sulfur, 4 parts, charcoal, 2 parts. That is how most firework compositions are illustrated. That's how they're written out, and that could be 7 pounds, 4 pounds and 2 pounds, or 7 kilograms, 4 kilograms and 2 kilograms, or it could be 7 grams. You know, it could be any measure, whether metric or freedom units, to make these sparklers. And I'm going to do a half batch in a gram scale quantity. So to start, I will measure out 3.5 grams of baking soda. All right. Perfect. 3.5 grams. I always love when I hit that right on the money with a scale this precise. That's a hard thing to do. All right. Thank you everybody, by the way, for jumping on this stream. Like I said at the start of this is my first ever public live stream. I did one yesterday on my my B channel, Nighthawk and Light Extra, but this is the first time doing it for such a large audience on my main channel. This, of course, is how I make my living, making these videos, and through your support on Patreon and things. I do Patreon live streams occasionally, but nothing like a stream to the full channel with an audience of this size. We currently have 470 people on right now, which is about 20 times more than I'm accustomed to at best for the Patreon live streams. And yeah, I'm really happy to have you all here. So, I said we needed several pieces of equipment to make these sparklers. We need a very accurate scale, and we need a mortar and pestle. At minimum, these are the two things that we need. So, starting with 3.5 grams of baking soda. Now, I have sulfur here, and by the way, check the video description if you would like to see different places where you can purchase the things used in this video. I have an Amazon affiliate store linked down below where different things can be purchased. How much sulfur did we need? We need 2 grams of sulfur for this half batch. And that's a little too much. Really, this is probably in the ballpark enough that I'm okay with it, but we're on a live stream. I want to be precise for just for the fun of it. Throw this into the mortar and pestle. And lastly, we need charcoal. Now, not just any charcoal will do. You can use lump hardwood charcoal out of a bag as you would use for a barbecue. Hardwood charcoal, lump charcoal rather, is the type of charcoal that actually looks like a natural piece of wood. You cannot use briquettes or anything that is already soaked in lighter fluid for use in a barbecue. But lump hardwood charcoal that still actually looks like a piece of wood is adequate for these sparklers. But for the best results, you're going to want to make your own charcoal. And for a demonstration to that end, I've dug up another video of mine from about 15 years ago. So here is me 15 years ago demonstrating one easy method to make homemade charcoal.
Now, the wood to be used for charcoal determines what it's going to be good for. A soft wood is typically good for black powder. And a sappy wood, such as pine, this is white pine here, is typically good for streamer stars, such as tiger tail. And so that is what I'm going to use for this run. I'm going to load up my crucible with this white pine here. Alright, with your crucible loaded up, go ahead and hammer the lid on here, then get yourself a fire going. You can see the smoke being released is very flammable. This is the oils from inside the wood burning off. About an hour in now, and you can see that the fire is still going very hot, and the flame coming out of the top of the can has slowed to a crawl. It is finally time to remove this charcoal. The flame has died. So what I will do is quickly take this out of the fire and put a damp rag over these holes, and that will keep air from getting inside and ruining this brand new charcoal. So now all that needs to be done here is to wait for this charcoal to cool down to air temperature. here is our charcoal. You can see if I take a piece of this, easily snaps in half, black all the way through the center.
Man, for those of you commenting that you remember that video when it was posted, you have been around a while. I started my YouTube channel in early 2007, and mostly to show off my fireworks related projects. I love that some of you remember that video and you are still with me. Thank you so much for putting up with all the stuff that I've done over the years that has been subpar. But anyways, to make Senko Hanabi, you are going to want to make charcoal in a process similar to what was shown in that video. The best woods to use for Senko Hanabi or for any sort of sparking effect are going to be resinous woods, like from an evergreen tree. So either pine or spruce, any kind of conifer kind of tree is going to be fairly good. I think most of the standard lumber that you would find in, in a hardware store anywhere in the world is going to be some kind of spruce or pine, some kind of resinous sappy wood that should work adequately well. And you don't need to do it in a full paint can as I did in that video. In fact, I was planning on maybe demonstrating live here right on the table how you would produce charcoal in something like this. Just a metal tin, poke a hole in the top, let it burn over a fire, and then cover it with a damp rag while the charcoal cools down. If you open the lid too early before the charcoal is cold, it will still be on fire, and you'll end up with some of it turning into ash instead of being that nice, pure charcoal. And the trick is to wait for that flame that is ejected out of the can to die off before you close the lid. And in that way, you can be pretty confident that you will have pure charcoal without any sort of woody bits remaining in the center. Now, the secret in terms of Senko Hanabi is that you need to grind the charcoal extremely fine. So I have my two other ingredients so far in the mortar and pestle, and you can do all of this by hand in this mortar and pestle. Mortar and pestle, do you guys say? I saw a lot of comments about that. I get enough comments like that when I'm pre-recording the videos and have time to think about my pronunciations. Anyways, you need to make sure the charcoal is super, super fine. Now, you can do this by hand in a mortar and pestle. Pestle. But it will take a very long time. That is the budget option, but you really want to use a ball mill. So a ball mill is basically just a rock tumbler with heavy milling media inside. In this case, I'm using steel ball bearings, which are not appropriate for most fireworks because steel is a sparking material. It can cause sparks and potentially ignite normal fireworks compositions, but because our composition that we're using here is completely non-flammable, we can get away with using steel ball bearings in a rock tumbler to grind charcoal to a very fine powder. This, after maybe about 8 hours of milling, will turn the charcoal into an extremely fine dust, which is suitable for Senko Hanabi. The other ingredients, the sulfur and the potassium or sodium bicarbonate, actually melt when you hit a flame to them, and so because they turn into a liquid, it really doesn't matter how fine of a powder they are. They'll mix together adequately well as soon as they melt. Charcoal, however, does not melt, so whatever particle size you start with, that is the particle size that the sparkler is going to have to work with in order to produce its sparks. The finer, the better, and so a ball mill is really the best way to go. But if necessary, you could spend about an hour of hand grinding in a mortar and pestle and end up with some super fine charcoal. So for my batch of sparklers here, I'm going to continue to measure out 1 gram of charcoal for a half batch of this bicarbonate-based, sodium bicarbonate, baking soda-based Senko Hanabi mix. So I have my charcoal pre-milled here, very, very fine charcoal in this bottle. And I'll see if I can get exactly 1 gram to go in this scale. I hope I hit a gram dead on, or am I looking for a gram? Yes. Okay, 1 gram. I hope I hit it dead on because charcoal's a little hard to scoop and get back in the bottle without making a mess. Sorry if the tapping's a little bit loud on the microphone. It's closer to the bottle than to me. Yeah! Oh, that's satisfying. 1 gram of fine pine airfloat charcoal. Airfloat just means that it's been very, very finely milled. Not in focus there, but pine airfloat charcoal. All right, and this goes into the mortar and pestle. Into the mortar and pestle. I have a weird accent, I've been told. People think I'm Canadian. I'm actually from Michigan, so I have a bit of a Michigan and Canada mix. Now, the good thing about this here is because I have pre-milled my charcoal, and the charcoal is already extremely fine, it means I don't have to spend a lot of effort milling this, really grinding this composition together. We just have to make sure it's well mixed. The grinding is already done of the charcoal, and so it should work fine in the Senko Hanabi without having to be ground any finer. It just needs to be, homogeneously mixed. And there we go. That is probably adequate mixing for Senko Hanabi, which is remarkable because it usually does take a very long time to hand mill a composition, but I really found that the secret is just pre-mill that charcoal and you can be in good shape with very minimal mixing. So let me show you the result of a sodium bicarbonate based Senko Hanabi, and we'll talk more about the rolling technique and my scoops and all this stuff later on in the video, not currently, because I can't talk about everything at once. A little pill-sized quantity of powder right in the end of a fold of paper here. See if I can get the camera to focus. There we go. And then I'm going to roll this very, very tightly. Oh, we already had a little tear in the paper. But it's okay. If the paper tears slightly in certain places, it's possible to recover. And we'll give you guys a good camera angle on the rolling technique when I get to that part in the video where I want to demonstrate that. All right. 1 Senko Hanabi sparkler, sodium bicarbonate based, and this is going to be a little bit different in how we ignite it. So let's place this up here, and this time I can't just ignite the end and allow it to burn naturally because it is bicarbonate based, and it doesn't have the chemical energy to actually ignite for itself. Let me get my close-up lens here. Bear with me on the live stream here, and switch over to this camera. So this is going to be a little bit different in that we need to use a torch lighter, this guy here, to actually melt the composition manually. Because there isn't the oxygen provided in this sparkler, you need to provide the energy externally to melt it. And we get a beautiful orange sodium glow in this variety of Senko Hanabi. This is the best part of these bicarbonate-based Senko Hanabi, is this brilliant orange glow. And look at those flares shooting off of the surface. How cool is that? Man, it's just like a star. I really love how these sparks are just so gentle, and I hope that the audio is being picked up on the stream. This variety doesn't burn up the stem quite as far as the standard mix, that is the potassium bicarbonate mix, but that was made with baking soda, a firework fueled by baking soda. How incredible is that? Baking soda, sulfur, charcoal. The only thing difficult to find in that is the sulfur, maybe, and you can find sulfur all over the place. Now, it does need to be fairly pure. I saw someone asking about the purity. You do want something like 99, at least 98% pure sulfur. But otherwise, go find someone with a pine tree that will let you take a dead branch out of their yard, and you will have enough charcoal for Senko Hanabis for life. It's not a complicated thing to make. How awesome. I love that so much. All right. Now, we are on to the... all right, so let's talk about standard Senko Hanabi here. So that was the sodium variety, as I mentioned. Now, that does not look quite the same as the normal, traditional Japanese Senko Hanabi. So this, again, is the normal variety, the flammable variety, made with oxidizers and normal firework ingredients. You get this flame out of the output, and these are just as dangerous to make as any firework in this form. But when we're making these sparklers, we're looking for particular things to happen. We're looking for 4 independent sparking stages, and this is the second one. The first one is just the molten drop before it starts emitting sparks. This is the third stage, a dense sort of crackly sparking effect. And then we end up, in just a moment here, we end up with this stage. This is my wife's favorite sparkler effect. And actually, in order to see this accurately to what it looks like to your eyes, you have to turn the frame rate of a camera way down so that it looks like stop motion, because that is what these sparklers look like to your eyes. It looks like a stop motion effect, especially when it's in the middle of the night, very dark. It's just the most beautiful thing. And this glowing ember can climb all the way to the end of the sparkler. Oh, it's just gorgeous. The ball dropped off. That doesn't always happen. That is actually part of the fun of using this particular type of sparkler traditionally in Japan. These are a type of sparkler that go back about 300 years in Japan. And part of the fun of using them as children is seeing who can make the molten drop last the longest. If the wind blows and the drop falls off, that is not what you're aiming for. So let me bring up a sheet here that I made about these sparklers for a in-person class that I did for one of my local fireworks organizations. And I want to bring you over to this camera here, and I just want to read the intro to this paper about the different sparking stages of these sparklers. So, hang on, I need to adjust something here. The hazards of live streaming. So these are the different sparking stages. We have 4 distinct stages here. The initial drop, then large bursting sparks. This is the best effect, I think. I mean, it's the most impressive. And then you have smaller crackling sparks, but they still branch, and then these very small non-branching sparks. This effect is the one that can last the longest, up to several minutes as it climbs all the way up to the paper tail. So I'm going to read from this article here. So a Senko Hanabi has 4 distinct stages of performance, which in Japanese culture are said to be representative of 4 stages of life. The first is the ignition, which forms a smoldering ember on the end of the paper wire, which soon gathers itself into a drop, representing birth and childhood. The second stage is the most spectacular, where the drop begins to emit very large branching sparks, the energy of youth. And the third stage sees the large sparks dissipate into a crackling display of small but very frequent branching sparks, which represents the productivity of middle age. And the final stage brings a slow burn of very fine sparks, which is seen as the wisdom of old age raining downward. Really a very, very beautiful sparkler, both in the tradition of it and in the art of manufacture. So, let's get into the actual rolling technique and the variation using potassium bicarbonate, which can hit all of these distinct sparking stages. So, the potassium bicarbonate version, this is a mixture that was co-invented by multiple experts that have been looking into these sparklers from all over the world. I've mentioned them in my previous Senko Hanabi videos. How Dr. Frederick van der Sipt, if you look up his name in regards to Senko Hanabi, you will find several articles about non-flammable variations, and he's the one that first informed me about these compositions or the possibility of this non-flammable variation. And from there, I was able to come up with this shelf-stable variety using bicarbonate instead of carbonate, which is not shelf stable. From there, many of you might have seen the video that I posted on the subject earlier about these non-flammable sparklers, and since then, the recipe has been perfected. And not by myself. Another YouTuber called Zoltree, bring up this camera again. Another YouTuber called Zoltree, XOLRT, what is it? XOLTRI, you can find him on YouTube, came up with this bicarbonate, potassium bicarbonate Senko Hanabi mixture. This is magic. This is an awesome composition, and I really don't think that I can improve it. I also came up with my own composition, which uses commercial lampblack that I purchased online. I think I found someone selling lampblack on Etsy, which I have not talked about yet. Commercial lampblack. That is the secret to making all of the 4 stages mentioned in this paper. Lampblack. This is an ingredient similar to charcoal in that it is pure carbon. However, it is in a different form. Carbon, as many of you know, can take many molecular forms, including graphite, diamonds, carbon nanotubes, graphene. It has many different molecular structures, and all of these have dramatically different properties. Lampblack is more akin to something like graphite in a pencil than it is to standard charcoal. And its burning effects in a Senko Hanabi are much different. And in fact, between different types of lampblack, depending on the process that was used to make it, the effects of the lampblack itself can be very different. So this, I want to be careful with this because it is a very fluffy, look at how jet black it is, by the way. Extremely fluffy black compound, which is just complete. This is the ingredient in black toner and very fine black inks. So, needless to say, this stuff can make an enormous mess. And by the way, this whole container is only like 2 or 3 grams. It's extremely low density for its volume. And this, once again, is another ingredient where you just cannot purchase a variation which is suitable for Senko Hanabi. And in Japan, there's a whole industry in making lampblack in a traditional way that is useful not only in Senko Hanabi, but also in very fine Japanese inks. And the way that they do this is they take pine tree stumps, allow them to age for several decades, and then they burn them under a sort of cheesecloth structure. And the soot from this pine stump burning collects on the cheesecloth, and you then scrape that off to get your lamp black. Well, Zoltry, the person who came up with this excellent Senko Hanabi recipe, tried something a little bit different, and that is to use vegetable oil. And I have another clip here to show you of that. So this is just ordinary vegetable oil, soybean oil in particular, which can be purchased pretty much anywhere. And by using a cotton wick, that is a wick of spiraled paper towel in a disposable, and it's important that it's disposable, aluminum cup full of this vegetable oil, we can make lamp black by burning it under a metal tray. After several hours, we collect about a gram of soot. It will look like a lot more than a gram, but because this is such low density stuff, it takes a lot in volume to actually make a little bit of lamp black. Now I paused it at this point because I want you guys to take a look at, in particular, at this aluminum tray. So the corners of this are bent downward to allow a gap underneath the tray for air to circulate inside, and that is how you allow the flame to burn from the vegetable oil under this tray and the exhaust from the flame to also come out. This is by far the easiest method I've ever seen to make lamp black, and it works really well. I tried many other things before Zoltry came up with this basic method. I refined it a little bit, put my own spin on it, and this is the result to make a large quantity. I mean, 1 gram doesn't seem large, but that's enough to make 1,000 of these Senko Hanabi sparklers. So it's a lot. It's a lot of lamp black that you get by this method, and I would not recommend doing this on a wood table as I do in this clip, by the way. I filmed this for an earlier video, and it was just convenient to film it in this setup, but I would set it on something like pavement. And as I mentioned, use a disposable aluminum cup to put your vegetable oil in, and the cotton or paper towel wick, because it will be very messy after that initial burn. And whatever container you use to burn that oil in is never going to be clean again. And in fact, the oils build up, different tars and things build up and cause the oil to no longer burn properly over time. So it really needs to be disposable. This is the secret ingredient, this lamp black, the secret ingredient to hitting all of our sparking stages. And the recipe for the ideal potassium bicarbonate Senko Hanabi mix is as follows. 4 parts potassium bicarbonate, 2 parts sulfur, half a part of pine char, and 0.25 of vegetable oil lamp black. This combined together, again, the pine char should be very finely ground in order to properly work in the Senko Hanabi. This ratio is going to make very nice sparklers. And I have some of this pre-prepared right here. Zoltry's mix, bicarbonate, potassium bicarbonate, Senko Hanabi mix. So there we have it. That is the bicarbonate-based Senko Hanabi mixture. And now we need to get into some of the things that I did not get very deep into in my videos about making Senko Hanabi. And that is the most difficult part of the process, which is the rolling technique. So, these are the papers that I use for making Senko Hanabi. This is a very large wedge of paper. You do not need to have the equipment to make your papers in this way. You can easily cut them by hand, but the type of paper which is used for the paper stems of a Senko Hanabi is extremely critical. The most important part is it needs to be a tissue paper which is very strong in one orientation. This is called the grain direction of the paper. And the best paper that I've found, very strangely, is white tissue paper sold by Dollar General. I have tried so many different types of paper. This is what works best. There's also one other option that works about equally as well that I found on Amazon. Plum Designs white tissue paper. I also have that available in the affiliate link in the video description. This is the stuff to use. This or Plum Designs from Amazon are the only two tissues that I found in the United States that work for this. In Japan, it would be made from very particular rice paper. My friend over at the YouTube channel Guillotined Chemistry, Mark, he has done some videos testing a lot of Japanese tissue papers. If you wanted to make these in the most traditional way possible, I recommend you go over and check out Mark of Guillotined Chemistry's videos in order to learn how to buy traditional Japanese papers and which ones would work best. These are the ones that I found work best in the United States. To test the tissue, it is important that you first tear it. Take one sheet and try to tear across. And notice how I started tearing in this direction, trying to make it tear that way, but instead it teared out sideways. That indicates the grain orientation of the paper, the direction that it most easily tears in. I can probably still tear this strip just about in half, almost all the way down from one end to the other because the grain of the paper is facing in that direction. And when you cut your strips for Senko Hanabi, you want them to be cut going with the grain that the paper most easily tears in. If they were going in this direction, once you went to roll them, they would tear across the grain and tear like this. And that would be no good. You need them to be strong in that direction, so cut your papers with the grain. Now, the dimensions of a Senko Hanabi paper are on screen now. This is both metric and imperial measurements, and you can see that I have the measurements for making a triangle, and you can then cut the tail off the triangle if you would like to have your Senko Hanabi have a flat tail like this, where it's squared off. Just as easily, it could come to a point, and that would be no problem. But these are the measurements, about 35 millimeters at the base and 267, about 270 millimeters long in order to make the papers of the correct size for Senko Hanabi. And the base size, the size of the base of these papers, this measurement here can be adjusted if you did change the type of tissue paper that you're using. If the tissue paper is of a thicker paper type, you would want to make this strip narrower so that there's less overall paper in the stem to even it out compared to the thickness of whatever paper you're using. And if you were using especially thin Japanese paper, you might be able to make these strips a little bit wider. But the length is about right. It should stay about the same as this. To cut these strips, you can use scissors. Now, I use a much larger paper cutter. This is a guillotine paper cutter, about $230, so it's more of an investment than I think most people will be able to make. Most people will not want to buy a paper cutter that's over $200 to make Senko Hanabi sparklers. Only someone who's really crazy about them like me would be into that. But I also have other options listed again in the video description and in the Amazon affiliate link for paper cutters that will work. The key thing is to have a paper cutter that's actually long enough to cut these strips. And a lot of off-the-shelf paper cutters at craft stores are going to be a little bit too short to cut these to the proper length. And so get online and look for a paper cutter that's over 10 inches in cutting area, cutting width, in order to get a cutter that would work for these. Or, of course, you could cut them individually by hand with scissors. That would be a lot of work. I wouldn't opt for scissors if I had any other option because you're going to want to roll probably about 100 of these before you're really satisfied with the results that you are able to make. Now, I have also dyed these papers. Let me bring over this camera here. You can see that the paper is nicely dyed to make a colored stem as it goes up the sparkler. These ones I actually messed up a little bit. You can see that this black stripe on the edge bled into the paper a little bit more than I meant it to. And bring you back over to this camera. So these papers can be dyed. It's not necessary, but if you are going to dye these, the correct thing to use is alcohol ink. So this is the type of ink that I use, Pinata. There's various other brands of alcohol ink that you can use, and then I just use a paintbrush to, once I have these papers cut in a bundle. If you're using a big guillotine cutter like me, you can cut several thousand papers at once like this, and keep them in these bundles to paint along the back edge and allow that alcohol ink to soak through all these papers at least halfway in order to properly color the sparklers. And of course, if you're using a smaller paper cutter, you'll get little packs. Maybe you can cut through 50 or so papers at a time, and you'll end up with a little pack like this. Just the same, you can paint on the back of these in order to allow the alcohol ink to absorb into these strips. And make sure you get the make sure you choose which side of the paper to color. One of these angles is a right angle, and the other goes down to the other edge of the triangle. You can tell that this is not the right angle. Sorry, I'm trying to get focus here. So you want to paint on the edge that has the right angle corner. So put your alcohol ink, brush your alcohol ink in here, and try to get it to absorb halfway through the stem. I dilute the alcohol ink about 50%. I will take this concentrated stuff and dilute it about 50% with rubbing alcohol, about 90% rubbing alcohol. 97% is fine off the shelf in the US. That's what you can get in order to water down this concentrate. If you do have too much ink in the paper, it can negatively affect the burn of the sparklers, but that's how you get nice colored paper like this. It is absolutely not necessary to color these papers, except for one aspect, which I will demonstrate in a moment. There is one functional aspect to the colorants on these paper strips, and that is the line along the back. Actually, let me show you something that I forgot to bring up earlier in this video. These right here. I'll have to bring you over to the other camera again. I actually am so into these sparklers that I considered for a time attempting to sell them. Pretty dumb after I put a lot of work into actually developing packaging and putting them into a product. But these, you can see, are 8 packs of sparklers. I really wanted to sell these things, but I could not because I realized I would have to sell them for more than $1 per sparkler, and really closer to $2 per sparkler to make it worth my time. And then it would take all the time away from making videos of the other things that I love. Boy, but I love these sparklers so much that I really wanted to turn these into a product. I actually have instructions for lighting these on the back because they're very different than other Senko Hanabi and other sparklers. You need to use a jet flame in order to melt this composition together in order to get them to burn. An ordinary lighter will not do. And so I put special instructions on the back. But if you take a close look at these sparklers, you will notice there's an attribute of them right in this section, which is a very tightly wound neck. So this little area here is where the pellets, where all the powder is contained. And then we have these very tight turns of paper separating the pellet from the rest of the paper stem. And then you can see this black stripe is more spread out over the rest of the sparkler. This black stripe is the only part of the colorant on these sparklers that makes a functional difference. You actually really want this black stripe on the paper because it makes them much easier to roll. This is the guide that you use in order to know if you're rolling them properly, because you want these multiple close turns. I'll put the close-up lens on the camera again. Pardon me, guys, with the unpolished nature of this stream again. You want these very tight turns of paper right at the base of the pellet of powder, because this is the part of the sparkler that needs to hold all the weight of the molten drop that these sparklers form. And so you need an extra amount of paper there, extra strength in the stem at that point, and then you want a longer stem. You want to actually have some length to the stem of these sparklers so that they have time to burn later on in the stages. And so you stretch out the spiral as you continue to roll them, and that is why the black stripe is further apart at this point. So that stripe is your guide to know if you have rolled these sparklers properly, both for looking at the neck of the sparkler to make sure that you have enough turns in that area and you have wound it tightly in that place, and that the angle of the paper is correct as you stretch out the sparklers all the way to the base. How pretty are these things? I mean, I can never sell these for more reasons than one, but boy, do I love rolling these sparklers. What an art. So, I want to bring you back now. I want to bring you back now and show this clip of me once again in Japan learning from the third generation, maybe fourth generation master craftsman of Senko Hanabi, Ryota Tsutsui, demonstrating his technique for rolling these sparklers. Now, the first step, as he is demonstrating, is to take the sparklers and contain some of the powder in the very tip of these of the strip of paper. And then with very precise motion, you roll this into a tight stem. And don't worry, I'm going to give you a better view of this being done myself. But I just wanted to show you how impressive it is to see a master at work. And look at those sparklers that he just laid out. Those 5 sparklers there are less than a millimeter different in length. He's rolled so many of these and is so precise at making these that they are just identical to one another and absolutely beautiful. All right, I'm going to give you a close-up look now. Let's, I will give you a close-up look now of rolling these sparklers. So, the first thing that needs to be done, oh, I never mentioned, okay, so, the one aspect of these papers which is mission critical is that black stripe, as I mentioned. If you are going to do nothing else, as far as the coloring goes for these sparklers, put a stripe on the back. So I have my pack of paper here that I've cut. Focus. I have my pack of paper that I've cut for these sparklers. This is what you would be able to cut with a cheaper paper cutter, maybe 50 of these. About an inch down, maybe 5 centimeters down from that right angle corner there. Take a Sharpie or alcohol ink and really give it a good stripe along the back. If you do no other coloring, this is what you need to do. This will really help you roll these sparklers. And so when we open this pack up, and by the way, for making it easier to cut, I usually back the paper with cardboard. Now these papers all have a stripe along the back. Some of them didn't get a very good one, so I'm going to make another pass. And I'm using a blue Sharpie, that's fine. So long as you have that stripe along the back of these papers that allows you to see how tightly you're rolling them. That is what you need for success in creating these sparklers. And if you do go through all the steps of using alcohol ink to color these sparklers, you want to make sure that the main coloration, that is the coloration which is all along soaked halfway through the paper. You can see I have blue here, and I have yellow, and then red. You want to make sure that that main coloration fully dries before you add the black stripe along the back, or else the black stripe will bleed into the paper, and you'll end up with something like this, where it's less of a stripe and more of, you know, a big dark area. So these papers were made incorrectly. You want it to look more like this. Oh, come on. Focus. Ah, the joys of live streaming. There we go. Sort of. All right. It doesn't want to focus on that. You guys get it. A black stripe at the back. Okay. Yeah. So, as you have seen so far in this video, the materials to make these sparklers, especially the baking soda ones where you don't have to worry about including lampblack. In fact, the baking soda ones do not work as well if you include lampblack because they need... Lampblack cools the mixture down. It makes the drop less viscous, and the baking soda variety are already not quite viscous enough to create the best sparks possible. And so adding lampblack is detrimental. So the ingredients are very simple, just your charcoal, sulfur, and baking soda. And then you need tissue paper. Granted, you need tissue paper from a very particular source and a fairly sizable paper cutter. But otherwise, this does not require much to be able to make these sparklers besides the skill in doing so. And so that's what we're going to see now is the technique for actually rolling these sparklers. This is the most difficult part of the process, but it's also the most satisfying. And I think if you can get through the initial learning curve and conquer your frustration, because this is frustrating at the start, I think that you will be very happy in having learned this skill in making these beautiful sparklers. I mean, who else can say that they know how to do this? And these, of course, the powder is completely non-combustible, and so it's a firework, a real firework, that you can make safely. It's amazing. I'm pushing to have these become a standard experiment in like high school lab settings, because this is an excellent chemistry experiment, less dangerous than many of the experiments already done in a chemistry lab setting, and there is just so much fun that can be had in making these sparklers. All right, somewhere I placed my, here it is, my little scoop. So I have a tiny scoop here that I use for, a little scoop that I use for loading these sparklers. So you want to have about 0.08 of a gram contained in each sparkler. And this little scoop, I'll move over to this as my main camera here. This little scoop is just a tiny piece of aluminum tubing that I've cut the end off of. And I'll put the close-up lens back on because that helps the camera focus a bit more. How is this stream going for a first ever live stream? I wish I wasn't struggling so much with focus and issues like that. But this scoop here, this scoop here is just a little piece of aluminum tube which I cut into a little scoop. I put a little dot of hot glue in there to block off the end. And this scoop's approximately between 0.08 and 0.1 of a gram with each scoop of powder after you knock off the excess. That's about 0.1 of a gram of Senko Hanabi powder. Now, in Japan, Ryota Tsutsui, the master craftsman, actually uses a piece of a windshield wiper like a little metal rail that runs down a windshield washer arm in order to make his little scoops. But instead of scoops, you can actually just use a coffee stir stick. Now this, it's not a scoop shape, but if you use a little coffee stirrer to pick up some of the powder and knock off the excess, you get a pretty consistent scoop. And you can put a little notch or something anywhere in the scoop to kind of make a mark for what length is the right length to have scooped your powder on in order to get a consistent quantity. Because this, of course, that's a pretty large quantity of powder. But if I took like that much, you can see that's still a consistent amount. It's mounted about the same height on the stick. And by just using less of the stick, I started there and now I'm here, we have adjusted the amount of powder, and this is a pretty consistent way to get the same quantity of powder in your Senko Hanabis every time. And that about right there looks like approximately the right amount to start with in these sparklers. So a pretty good and easy way to make a scoop, just a coffee stir stick. It looks like a popsicle stick, but it's a little bit narrower than an ordinary popsicle stick. So that's a good tip for an easy way to come by a scoop. You can just visit a coffee shop, buy a cup of coffee, and get a scoop there. But yes, someone mentioned that using a scoop feels more sophisticated, and I agree. The pleasure in making these sparklers is, in part, the difficulty and the handcraftedness of it. And so making a little scoop like this, where you have this nice squared off wood stick, it just feels really nice. By the way, the powder tends to stick in the end of the little scoop, and so in order to prevent it from sticking, you can stick the tip of this scoop in a lighter flame to warm it up a little bit, and then rub it on a candle, and then wipe off the excess wax. Just melt a little wax on there from a candle, and you'll end up with a non-stick coating for your scoop. So, to start making a Senko Hanabi, go to this camera here. To start making a Senko Hanabi, you take your strip of paper and you can pinch it between two fingers like this. That's one of the best ways to start. And then fold over the end to make a pocket. So you can see that the black stripe is on the top edge here facing away from me. And I have a little fold here to make a pocket. And then at this point, I take a scoop of my powder, knock off the excess, and place it into the fold. I'm trying to maintain focus. I might have to take off the close-up lens again. Place the powder into the fold. And that, by the way, is a big scoop. I added a bit too much there, maybe, as I was trying to do it through the camera viewfinder. But we have a scoop of powder there, and it's about 1 centimeter or a 1/4 of an inch, a little more than a 1/4 of an inch from the end. And we can contain it now in this fold by folding it over like this, kind of like a taco. Now the trick here, lick your finger or have a damp sponge and get your fingers nice and damp so that you can actually dampen all the way through both layers of this paper right at the corner. And this is the part which is going to end up being most frustrating is starting the rolling process. Because what you need to do from here, once you have this paper dampened, and you really want it damp right in the very corner especially, you want to roll this starting in the very corner, sliding your finger and thumb together. You want to do that. You see how I've started a very tiny roll right there? That is very tricky to do as you are first starting. And it takes some practice to get the right amount of moisture on there without soaking the paper and making it weak. But I'm pinching my fingers now of my left hand. I'm pinching at the base of where the powder is contained. So the powder is all right here. I'm pinching with my finger and thumb to prevent that powder from going anywhere, from going backwards into the stem. My finger and thumb are going to stay very still as I do this rolling with my right hand. I'm not going to move my finger and thumb of my left hand out of this position until I've continued rolling from the tip of the sparkler, and the powder will contain itself in a pellet like that. If you move this hand, your left hand, you're doing things wrong. As we get to this point, you can start to inch your left hand backwards. But this is the important part, is your right hand, or whatever your dominant hand is. If you're left-handed, do this part with your left hand. This is where all of the rotational energy comes from. You're going to want to naturally use your left hand to roll the sparkler, but if you do that, the stem is going to be very weak. The left hand's job is to provide tension. You are pulling on the paper with your left hand as you are rolling the sparkler so that there's tension along the length between your fingers. You are pulling and adding tension, which allows the rotational motion of your right hand, or your dominant hand, to cause the stem back here to roll up naturally. Look I'm not doing anything with my left hand except pinching and pulling. And you can see that the stripe is forming a tight neck. The way that you form that neck is you watch the angle of this paper, and this angle should be coming off almost at 90 degrees to the sparkler like this. You can see how coming in this way and then going straight up, that's almost a 90-degree angle, and that prevents the spiral from stretching out. You put 4 or 5 turns there in the sparkler right at this neck. Again, this needs to be the strongest point to support the molten drop of the sparkler. And then, by pulling a little bit more with the left hand, you can start stretching the angle of this paper out so it's no longer at 90 degrees. This angle is now much wider so that when I continue to roll, providing all of the rolling force with my right hand and just providing tension with my left, look at how that black stripe has started to stretch out. I'm providing rotational motion with this hand. My left hand is pulling and doing a little bit of like a crumpling motion on this little bit of paper here as it's spiraled up. I'm kind of like providing a little bit of crumpling action to get it into a dense spiral. Pulling, tension between my two hands. As much tension as I can provide on this stem without it snapping. And in the end, we should end up with this. This is a single strip of tissue paper, floppy, super floppy tissue paper, now made into a very stiff sparkler stem. It can actually hold the weight of the powder at the tip by holding it in the middle like this, and the reason it is so stiff is because of that very precise rolling technique. With all the tension pulling between my two hands as I roll allows this stem to become stiffer and stiffer as it's spiraled, as it's rolled together, and that is what allows the stem to be stiff. This is one of the key secrets that was taught to me in Japan by the master craftsman. In hearing reports of what Senko Hanabi sparklers were like in the early 2000s when I was first reading about them in pyrotechnic journals, they speculated that that some kind of binder, some kind of glue must be added to the paper in order to make it this stiff. In fact, it's just a very precise, masterful technique in rolling the paper in such a way that it feels like this is stiffened by glue or some kind of hardening agent. It's amazing. How did Japanese people come up with something like this hundreds of years ago? It's just a work of art, and I love it. I love it so much. Let's see how this one burns, and don't worry, I'm going to do that rolling technique several more times in order to show you in order to give you a better look. How amazing. Look at that paper. The paper stays together. It doesn't unwind. It's solid because of that rolling technique. Absolutely awesome. Okay, let's bring you into camera 3 here. Or let's do that the other way around. There we go. It is pure pyrotechnic origami. And I have to use a torch lighter, a torch flame lighter, to ignite these because they contain no oxygen in the composition. It requires high heat to get the reaction started, making them very safe. So we did not get much of a first stage or a second stage on that one. It jumped right into the crackling spark phase. We kind of missed the initial bursting spark phase. You'll have to forgive you'll have to forgive a little bit of sloppy technique doing this for the camera. Here is the final stage. And this will burn forever. Look at the smoke. How cool is that? How beautiful is that laminar smoke? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I have a fume extractor set up there, by the way, because the you should not do these indoors as I am without some kind of fume extraction, and of course you wouldn't want to do it indoors for fire reasons anyway. But yeah, you need fume extraction because they do release some sulfur dioxides, sulfur oxides, which can irritate your sinuses. But it is, yeah, absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. All right, I am going to do another, I'm going to roll another one here and give you guys another look at that because this is indeed the key to making consistent Senko Hanabi. Let's see, maybe I'll just key it in here. I'll do the picture-in-picture here. Maybe I'll do it the other way around, though. There we go. So now you get the big screen of me rolling. And I'll see if I can roll one that really works well. So, starting with the paper like this, stretched out between my dominant hand and the tail toward my non-dominant. I'm going to take the paper with this right angle on the upward side here, and the black stripe is on the top. I'm going to make a small fold here. It's not critical how big this fold is. I've messed around with a lot of different ways to make this fold, and make it approximately so it looks like what I'm doing on camera here, but it's not mission critical. Open up the fold and get yourself a scoop of powder. I'll do a big scoop. It's risky with a big scoop that the drop will fall off the end of the sparkler and it will not, if the drop falls off, then the sparkler doesn't work. But if you can use a larger quantity of powder, it will be a more impressive, effect. So, lick my fingers, get the corner of this very damp, and look at, I'm not moving my left hand at all. I just have it pinched. As I start this roll, start a roll right in that corner. Not moving my left hand, not moving my left hand. And this is just rolled up into a super tight pellet. Super tight pellet. Still not moving my left hand. And finally, I'm kind of scooting my left hand backwards. And now we're forming the neck of the sparkler. Have this paper just about at a right angle, not quite at a right angle to to the stem. There's the neck. Maybe do 4 or 5 turns right there. You can do between like 4 and 6 is adequate. And then start kind of using your left hand now to do a little bit more action and stretching out the stem angle. All of the rotational energy coming from your right hand or your dominant hand as you just use the left hand to provide tension and to kind of guide the back of this paper here to make sure that it's rolling properly and not getting all crumpled or something in a weird way. If you're providing enough tension on this stem, that is what's going to make this sparkler stiff. Look at that. It's like a wire. Awesome, awesome. Am I a little too easily impressed with myself? I don't know. I'm really not impressed with myself. I'm impressed with this craft, and I'm impressed with the mastery, the absolute mastery that invented such a thing. This method of wrapping a Senko Hanabi sparkler. I'm just floored by how it was done. So many things need to go right to make a sparkler like this work. And it's just amazing that anyone could figure it out. There we go. All right, let's try this one again. I figured this would be like the most peaceful possible thing to do a live stream on as my first live stream ever. There's a lot of moving parts. I really want to demonstrate all the different secrets to making these sparklers that I couldn't cover in my ordinary videos on them. So I have a whole bunch of talking points that I've wanted to get into. But all the same. So there we go. Those are the big bursting spark stage. Then here we have the crackling sparks, smaller crackling sparks. And the final stage. Again, my wife loves this stage because it's so pretty. I need to adjust the let me take this camera here. I'm going to adjust the frame rate down. This is literally, it looks like it's stop motion, I know, at this frame rate. This is literally what these sparklers look like in person. If you have too high of a frame rate, they look too smooth on camera. I had to take it out of the clamp because it was getting to the top. That would have kept burning otherwise. But it's amazing. They look like stop motion in real life. It's just the most beautiful thing. Just absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. I love it. This is just... I have rolled thousands and thousands and thousands of these sparklers at this point. You can expect to roll probably at least 100 before you're making ones that are adequately... Like, they adequately resemble the ones made in Japan. Or these, a proper Senko Hanabi as you're seeing on this stream. I think I can call my Senko Hanabi a proper sparkler at this point. I think that I've close to mastered them. But you will get results earlier on than that. Earlier on than your first 100 if you try this. It just... Don't expect mastery to come quick. And this is just about covers all the details for making these sparklers, this particular variety. I still have one more variety of Senko Hanabi to talk about and demonstrate in this video, which I have never demonstrated how to make before on my channel, so we still have more to get into. One more thing that I should cover here. One more thing that I should definitely cover is the technique for actually lighting these. So obviously the sparklers are used in a downward position, unlike traditional American sparklers, wireframe sparklers. You do not hold them upright. You hold them at a downward angle. In Japan, they'll often hold them straight up and down, although this is not the best way to light them. I was taught by Ryota Tsutsui in Japan, the best way to light them is on an angle. And I've also found myself, even lighting them horizontally like this, also works very well. The best way is to, the reason to light them on an angle is it allows the molten drop to cling more strongly to the paper stem. And so you can actually add more powder to these sparklers and get a larger drop and a bigger effect by having them at an angle. And then as the drop decreases in size throughout the lifetime of the sparkler's burn, you can increase the angle to be more vertical. And then the proper lighting technique is to take a torch lighter like this and hold it to the tip of the sparkler and just slowly melt the powder toward the stem, back toward the stem, until you have a fully molten drop. And the one thing to watch is just to make sure that you are not, make sure that you don't actually catch the paper stem on fire. If you put the flame too high above the pellet of powder, you will end up catching the stem on fire, and then the drop will fall off. So, and that's another thing to know about these sparklers is to make sure that when you are lighting them, that whatever surface you're lighting them above is not in itself flammable, or else you may end up having a molten drop fall on the surface below, and that can cause, obviously that can cause some issues. Here again is a standard Senko Hanabi. This one uses the traditional flammable Senko Hanabi mix that I am not showing how to make in this video, but it's actually not as, even though it does not require holding a torch to it to ignite it, it's basically exactly the same in every other respect. As the carbohydrate-based Senko Hanabi, and so there's really no reason to make this flammable variation except to demonstrate how they work in the classical way in Japan. Otherwise, there's really nothing but benefits in making the bicarbonate-based, non-flammable, and non-hazardous variety. Okay, bring it back down here. I will roll. Let's see. Let me check my notes and make sure that there's nothing else that I wanted to demonstrate here before I move on to the next part. Yeah, that covers everything for the paper stem Senko Hanabi, and so I'm pretty excited now to get into. I'm pretty excited now to get into the stick type Senko Hanabi, which I at one point uploaded a short to this channel showing those sparklers being ignited, but I have never actually shown how to make them. By the way, just pulling this sparkler off of this stand just now reminded me, just to remind everyone that this is not a video about ordinary fireworks manufacture and the safety that is required for ordinary fireworks. I am doing all sorts of things that would be very hazardous if I was making a standard type of firework. Having lit sparklers by containers full of composition, very dangerous under normal circumstances. However, this type of sparkler composition, as we have seen, is completely non-flammable. I can hold a torch to it. You can put out a fire with this type of sparkler composition because of its unique attributes. This is the only non-flammable firework in the world. Really incredible. A few little glowing dots, which will quickly go out. Absolutely amazing. Do not follow. do not be so flippant about using sparklers or any other sorts of fireworks around or anywhere near a place where fireworks are made under ordinary circumstances. Yeah, these are a very special type of sparkler using non-flammable compositions, and so it is okay to actually ignite them in proximity to the powder they're made from. And in fact, if there were a fire, I could throw this powder on top of it and put it out. Not so with ordinary fireworks. What do you say? One more, and then I'm going to play a little clip here of the next type of Senko Hanabi that we will get into. The stick type. Well, I take about a 1 minute breather and get a drink before starting the next segment. Once again, this is the very first live stream I have ever done on this channel. And yeah, it's fun. I would love to be able to jump on here with you guys more often for live streams. But it takes the right topic for me to be able to come live and have an organized format to be able to present. I really know Senko Hanabi, and so this is one thing that I felt like I could talk about live with just a sheet of bullet points and be able to make a good main channel worthy video for it. And if you like seeing me live and you want to see more of this, head over to my second channel, Nighthawk and Light Extra, and you can see previous live streams that I've already published over there. They will not go live on that channel very often. You will not be able to catch them live on the Nighthawk and Light Extra channel very often because those are Patreon live streams, which I later publish as live videos on that channel so that everyone can see the videos for free, and then actually seeing them live is a perk for patrons. And so if you want to see more of these and interact with me live, I do more viewer interaction on those Patreon live streams because there are fewer comments to keep track of, and I can actually read them as we go along and keep up to date with the comments. Yeah, if you have the extra income, I would really appreciate your support on it on Patreon. If you do not have extra income, do not support me on Patreon. I only want those who actually can afford it, who have the extra income, and yeah, really like what I'm doing here to support me. If it puts any financial pressure on you, stay away from my Patreon. I don't want you putting yourself under any financial strain to send me money. It's really just for those who really love the projects that I'm doing here, and the main Patreon perk that I've been doing recently is just jumping on for a live stream now and then, where we're actually working on an active project, doing live experiments, unscripted, unplanned, and just seeing what happens. And usually that's catastrophic. Usually the things that I do during Patreon live streams either take much more effort than I expected, or they don't work at all. But it's a lot of fun, and we get to talk a lot more back and forth than I do in this format. This is maybe the one format, doing a live stream on the main channel, where I don't know if I'll be able to read everybody's comments. I guess I can go back and watch this video again and catch up on the live stream after the fact, or catch up on the live chat after the fact. But otherwise, I ordinarily read every single comment on my videos. A little hard to do that when they're happening as I'm filming. All right, are you guys ready? Are you guys ready to see the stick type Senko Hanabi? Let me cue this up here. Oh, actually, before that, here, one more thing. I just want to, this is the last image that I forgot to show earlier. You can use this for reference for how to roll these sparklers. This is an image showing the different stages of the rolling process and the neck. This image is nice because you can see how tight the spiral of the neck is. And yeah, so this is a very good image to use for reference of the different steps of rolling. But go back and reference the actual live footage of me rolling the sparklers if you're trying this, so that you can notice what I'm doing with my left hand. The Japanese way of learning to make these sparklers turns out is the right way, which is just watch what the person who knows what they're doing is doing and pay real close attention. And just do it over and over again, copying their hand movements exactly until you get it down. There's a Japanese philosophy of doing, of like learning craft, which I actually really like, that I learned while I was there, which is that the American version of learning to do something would be, you're making a product, you find a step in the way which is really hard to do, and so you invent some machine that will come along and make this hard part easier on you. The Japanese way is to beat your body into submission until that hard part becomes easy. And that is exactly the way that these sparklers were developed, and it's the way that they really need to be, that is the way you need to learn yourself if you want to learn how to make these properly. Just go back and watch how to make these. Yeah, watch how I do it. Watch the clip of Tsutsui-san in the little clip that I played from Japan, and see what you can learn. And that's the ticket. Okay, let's go on to the watching the first clip that I ever shared on this channel of the stick type variation of Senko Hanabi. And I'm going to take a brief pause. I might let this short. It's about 1.5 minutes long. I might let it loop once or twice as it plays, so that I can take a brief pause before we get on to the next part of the video. All right, we are back. Had to get a drink. We've been going for... I don't know how long we've been going for. Quite a while in any case. Stick around for the very end of this video. After we're done doing the stick type Senko Hanabi, I'm going to just goof around and read the comments a little bit and talk to you guys. And I'm really looking forward to that part of this stream. I figure if anyone makes it all the way to the end, they won't mind just sitting around and chit-chatting for a while. So, you have just seen a short being played of the stick type based Senko Hanabi, and these are even rarer than the ordinary paper type Senko Hanabi, which we have just spent all this time making. This is a variation which some of the older people in Japan might remember more than the younger people. There is literally only one manufacturer of this type of sparkler left in Japan, and that is Ryota Tsutsui and Tsutsui Tokimasa. And I did not learn how to make these sparklers while I was there, though I did see some of the process that they used to make them, and that starts by actually planting a field of rice. They need to actually grow the rice straw used in these sparklers for themselves, because the type of straw they use is not made anymore. The machines that collect the rice straw in modern equipment, they like crush it up, they make it in ways that, or they collect it in ways that do not maintain the stiff and stable stems required for these sparklers. Now, I don't use rice straw, but I found that many different natural grasses do still work to make these sparklers. And so the best way to start out in making these sparklers is to go out into an overgrown field or side lot or something like that. Go look for someone with a chain link fence who is not weed trimmed along the edges, and find long, stiff, and hopefully dried out grass stems. If they're not dry, snip them off with a pair of scissors and then just set them somewhere in the sun or in a dry room to stiffen up. Now, the cool thing about these sparklers is that they are much easier to make, way easier to make than the paper-stemmed variety. They do not last as long as the paper-stemmed variety, but they do have a slightly different effect. Actually, I don't have a great setup here for igniting them, but I will, I guess I'll just ignite one in hand and bring you over. Here, we'll come over to this camera here, and I'll start by lighting this one with a torch. And we'll see if it works. I just made these ones yesterday, and I'm not as proficient in making these as I am the other types, the paper stem type of Senko Hanabi. And so it's not quite, I'm not quite as reliable in the results I get out of these ones. These ones you can see are ignited upright at a 45-degree angle, so basically opposite to the paper-stemmed ones. You don't want to hold them over your hand because the drop could still fall off and that would cause a burn. Unlike the paper-stemmed ones, these ones need to have a little bit of airflow in order to properly combust. And that is the case of the ones made in Japan as well, so that's not that's not just my failure in manufacturing them correctly. It helps if there's a little bit of a breeze, or if we use a candle to ignite them, which is not possible for the other type of Senko Hanabi, the paper-stemmed one. You cannot use a soft flame to ignite that type of Senko Hanabi, at least not the bicarbonate non-flammable variation, but you can do that with these, and that is because the powder is held together with a binder, which makes, I think it makes heat transfer more easily through the powder of these sparklers. And then holding the sparkler over the flame of the candle actually gives a natural draft, so you don't have to blow on them anymore, and you get this sparking effect. Now, Obviously, they are shorter lived than the paper stem, but this final stage is much more spectacular. We'll see if it is on this particular one. Maybe not on this particular one, but on the short that you saw, the last stage of these sparks can get like, they can get like this long, and it makes a really cool noise. I mean, it's just, these are really interesting and unlike any other sparkler that you will ever see. And because they're much easier to make than the paper type, this might be a good starting point for anyone who wants to have try their hand at Senko Hanabi without having to spend days and days and possibly months mastering the craft of rolling the paper, cutting the paper, finding the right paper, and then potentially dyeing it and all these things. And you can use a soft flame to ignite them. Just super neat. So, these sparklers use the exact same compositions as the original Senko Hanabi. So we can use Zoltri's Mix, the same powder composition used in the dry sparkler. We could even try the baking soda variation and all sorts of other compositions in between. The difference is we need to actually wet these and use a binder. So I start by making a gel. And this is what we will use to wet the powdered composition, mix it all together into a paste, and then we'll use a particular technique, a new trick I have, for coating the grass stems. So let me play a brief clip of making the powder mix. We are going to be using 1 gram of xanthan gum and 1/10 of a gram of laundry starch. Now, instead of laundry starch, this is the binder that holds everything together and causes the pellet to dry into a hard chunk on the end of these stems. You could use any type of laundry starch. You could use dextrin. You can use liquid laundry starch like Staflo. Anything that is going to hold these sparklers together. The traditional glue that is used is hide glue, animal hide glue, which you can find on eBay, Amazon. But I prefer laundry starch because it's just a little bit easier to use. And this bag of Simply Starch laundry starch will last multiple lifetimes. So here is a clip of how to make the gelatin in a 100 milliliter quantity that we will then mix with the powder. So starting with 1 gram of xanthan gum in this cup, and the extra 1/10 of a gram in there is the laundry starch. This goes into a 100 milliliter beaker. You don't need a beaker, but you need some way to make some kind of 100 milliliter measurement. And then I'm wetting this with rubbing alcohol to make a slurry. Xanthan gum tends to clump when it's mixed with water, but mixing it with rubbing alcohol before you add the water is what prevents clumps. And you'll see as I pour water into this beaker that we get a very homogeneous gel right from the start. Look at how that just mixes very easily with that water. And as we stir it together, that xanthan gum will begin to thicken. Really easy to do. And this is our base mix for making the stick type Senko Hanabi. In the end of that clip there, it was still fairly liquid, but now you can see I put a popsicle stick in there and it pretty much stays upright. So it's a very thick mixture. And this is what you want for combining with the powder composition. You need the thickeners so that the powder doesn't settle. If you just wet this powder down with water and something to hold it together like a binder, it would settle out, and all the heavy stuff in this composition would sink to the bottom, and you would lose the correct ratio of your Senko Hanabi mix. So the gelling agent, the xanthan gum, is the key ingredient for the stability of the mixture, and the starch is what holds it all together in the end. So let's start by making a paste out of some of this Senko Hanabi composition, which can then be used to coat our stems. So I'll bring you back over here to this camera. And this is what we will use here. I'll use this little cup and I'll weigh out 4 or 5 grams of Senko Hanabi composition using a popsicle stick. So this is the base mixture. As I said, I have 100 mils of this, or a little bit less now because I've used some of it. And so you make a bunch of the gel prior to actually mixing it. So you make the gel first, and you can store it pretty much indefinitely to mix with the powder when needed. I just found that it was easier to make the gel separately in a large quantity than mix it directly into the powder. And in that way, because you have the gel set aside, you can save it and use it in any different sort of sparkler mixture that you came up with. If you wanted to try modifying these mixtures a little bit, you could do that, and then you can still mix this same gel in order to turn whatever your composition ends up as into the stick type variety of sparkler. So I have 5 grams of composition there, and I found that in order to make these sparklers successfully, we'll need a 1 milliliter syringe, or at least maybe a 5 mil at most, and you want to measure 3/4 of a milliliter for every gram of powder. So 3/4 of a mil. Let me bring in this piece of paper just so you can see this. This is the recipe for the liquid solution. 1 gram xanthan, 0.1 of, I say dextrin here, but it's laundry starch. And then we have 100 mils of water. And then once you have this base mixture combined, you add 3/4 of a mil for each 1 gram of powder to make your sparkler mix. All right. Yeah, someone says 5 on the nose for my measurements. I've done pretty darn well this video. Pretty darn well this video for hitting my measurements where I wanted. So I've got a little 1 mil syringe here. I'm going to take 3/4 of a mil. So 7.5 of a mil, basically. You know, you can be plus or minus 1/10 of a mil. So that's 1, and we need to do that 5 times because I did 5 grams. 2. And 3. 4, and this will be 5. There we go. And it's not gonna. This is not gonna feel like enough liquid in this container to fully. It's not gonna feel like enough liquid to fully saturate this powder here, but it's all that it takes. So just keep stirring it until we get a slurry-like consistency. Oops, spilled a little bit and should still be okay. And this is actually pretty critical. You can't add any more of the liquid than this, or else the sparklers will not burn properly. I tried adding 1 mil of this liquid, and the sparklers did not burn nearly so easily. In fact, you could no longer ignite them over a normal candle flame. So 3/4 of a mil per gram is about ideal. All right, we'll call that good enough. I might mix that for another few minutes if I were doing that offline and not for the stream. So maybe continue to mix that for a few minutes in order to make sure it's fully homogenized. And then we take a 5 mil syringe. So this one is already prepared. I've already pulled some of this same solution up into here from yesterday to make the sparklers that I have on the table. But basically a 5 mil syringe is pretty good. And if you have I'll show you the type of tip on here. Syringes are available all over the place online, eBay, Amazon. People use them for measuring all sorts of things. This one, 5 milliliters, and you want this this sort of tip on the syringe. This is pretty critical for how we actually make these sparklers. This is the secret to making it really easy. So I'm going to switch cameras again here and show you once I suck some of this putty up into the syringe, if I can. Anyway, I got a little bit in there, and what you need to do is shake it down into the bottom of the syringe, eject the air, and then suck up more until you have a full syringe. Do this a little at a time, and it's kind of difficult because this putty is so thick, but it'll eventually get in there, and you'll have a full syringe of this Senko Hanabi mixture. For now, I'm just going to use this stuff that I've prepared earlier. Yes, this is a slip tip syringe, someone commented. So not a lure lock. That's the other type of syringe. Get a slip tip syringe. You can get a 100-pack of these for like $10 or something. And now, the secret for actually coating the these powder stems. So you can see that these are a little bit rough. And I just made all of these yesterday, so I was doing it and kind of refamiliarizing myself with how I do this for the stream, so they're not as smooth as they could be. In Japan, these sparklers would be dip coated, so they'd take something like a pegboard, which has like a bunch of holes in it, and then you put all the stems that are going to be formed into the sparklers through the holes in your pegboard, and then you would slowly dip that into a vat of the liquid sparkler composition. In this case, I'm going to use the syringe, and we're going to do this one at a time. But it's actually very easy, and I did all of these in only like 2 or 3 minutes to get all of these coated. Where did I put my... One moment here. Okay. So here are a bunch of grass stems that I've collected. And what we do in order to coat these is take the syringe, and we are going to insert the stem into the tip. Just like that. Actually, let me put on the close-up lens so I can get you a good view of this. Okay. So, grass stem right here. Inserted into the syringe, and you want to insert this, oh, I don't know, a ½ inch or something. Because these are so easy to make, you can experiment with the amount of composition that you put on these stems, but you slowly squeeze the plunger as you retract the piece of straw, forming a sparkler. Now I got a little bit of a drip on there, which I can just drag. I can just even out a little bit. Doesn't really matter. And like I said, this is a type of sparkler that I'm not as proficient at making look professional. But about that quantity of sparkler mix is what you're looking for. And then just stick this upright in a container of sand in order to allow it to dry. So there we go. That is how to make these sparklers. Extremely easy. And it's a great thing to do as you are mastering the paper stem type, because you can use the same composition to make these in the meantime and be able to experience the Senko Hanabi sort of effect, which is a very unique type of spark for fireworks. In person, they are just so gorgeous. And you can experience the effect before you've actually put in all the work to learn how to make the paper stem type. And so this is a variety which is, if you have dexterity problems, not everyone in the world is going to be able, have the physical ability to make the paper type Senko Hanabi. You might be able to make this variety. And it's just, it's a great, I flicked it a little bit and it came off there. That's okay. I can suck that back up in if I want. Maybe. It does make a bit of a mess. But this is an extremely easy type of sparkler to make, which is just Still absolutely beautiful. You get some of the Senko Hanabi effect, and you can do it with any sort of Senko Hanabi composition just by mixing it in that 3/4 ml to 1 gram ratio with the base liquid mixture. You let these dry for about 24 hours. It's important to let them dry or they won't work properly, and you will have a stick type Senko Hanabi, one of the rarest fireworks in the world, easily made in a bicarbonate variation, non-flammable, non-dangerous composition, and they can be lit with an ordinary candle flame. So, if you are interested in these sparklers without being interested in dedicating a significant part of your life to learning the rolling technique, these are the ones for you. So, lighting these is also, it's easy with a candle flame, but you have to have a particularly hot candle flame. Something like a tea light will not work, but a pillar candle, which has this sort of bright white, very bright flame, that's a good indicator of how hot the flame is. This is adequate to melt the composition because of the state it's in, being held together by that binder. Oop. And they drop off, so you have to be a little bit careful. A little bit careful with what surface you have them over, just like the other variety. Boy, but they are beautiful when they work. Much shorter lived effects, but more dramatic. Look at how far those sparks are flying for that last stage. That's the most impressive part of this variety, is that last stage is just, it can be enormous. Holding it over the heat of the flame, the draft of the flame helps the composition to burn more vigorously. This one has a bit more composition on it. This sparkler, you can see I was a little more generous with how much I pumped out onto the stem, and so it will be at risk of falling off. But if it sticks, it's going to be really spectacular. Oh, come on. Trying to do something on my streaming software at the same time as this is going. Sorry, guys. One sec. There we go. I was just trying to change the camera. Well, there we have it. How to make stick-type Senko Hanabi. This was much faster than learning how to make the paper variety. I mean, it helps that we didn't have to relearn how to make the composition. Let me just double-check my notes and make sure that I had no other important details that I needed to cover before I dig into comments. Yeah, so with these sparklers, most native grasses will work. A friend of mine actually grows a northern Russian variety of rice, and it's like dry highland rice or something like that, so it doesn't have to actually be grown in water. And those stems from that rice, if you wanted to be really advanced and grow your own stems, they should work for this. But otherwise, native grasses pretty much anywhere are going to be okay. And you can start making these basically from materials found in anyone's unmown lawn. Yeah, spectacular final stage. There we have it. Well, I think that covers the basics of how to make Senko Hanabi. I mean, I could talk for probably another half hour about little intricacies of the rolling technique, but that is all the details, and I would love to just hang out with you guys now and read through some of your comments. Let me see if I can actually change the stream latency. I guess it's too late for that. But yeah, so let me read some of your comments, and we'll just hang out here for a while, and maybe I'll roll some more Senko Hanabi and see how it I don't know, just enjoy ourselves pre-New Year's. I really wanted to get out this video before the new year for any of you that wanted to try making these sparklers for New Year's. And I feel like every year I want to do a New Year's video. I actually here's a little secret for a video that I've dreamt of but will almost definitely never do, is one of my greatest childhood disappointments is hearing all of the adults in my life talk about, are you going to stay up to see the ball drop? And then when I finally stayed up and watched what they were talking about, I was severely disappointed that this giant crystal ball that they're lowering, or that they have in New York to commemorate the new year, they lower it slowly to the ground. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there staring at it saying, I cannot wait to see that thing hit the pavement. And they lower the thing slowly to the ground and auction it off to make a stupid buck instead of giving all the kids out there that can finally stay up for New Year's a show. That was a severe disappointment. And a video idea that I have had in the past is to make the New Year's ball drop in the way that I imagined it would be, hearing about it from adults as a kid. Stupid. I would love to make some giant glass crystal structure and just smash it, but that's not really what my channel has turned into. So let me read some of your comments here and see if there's any anything that I can respond to here as we hang out toward the end of this live stream. Let's see. Yeah, people commenting about different ingredients that they've tried in this. Using active carbon powder in these in place of charcoal or lampblack will not work. Purchased lampblack will almost definitely not work either. There are a few. Lampblack is a very hard ingredient to find, but there are a few sellers on like eBay or Etsy. Especially I've found, weirdly, I found a lot of niche chemicals on Etsy. You can find people selling lampblack in those places occasionally, but they will not work near as well as homemade lampblack, because carbon has so many different varieties of molecular structures that it can take, from carbon nanotubes to buckyballs. It's very different depending on how it's made, and it will burn very differently in a Senko Hanabi. So the best way to do it is to make it yourself from oil, vegetable soybean oil, or as I've done in previous videos, from pine, which is more similar to what they do in Japan. Let's see here. The smell of these sparklers is actually really pleasant, as long as you don't want to get a direct whiff of it, because it contains a lot of sulfur, and burning sulfur creates sulfur oxides, which is an irritating odor. But otherwise, it just smells like fireworks, which is one of my favorite smells ever since I was a little kid. Go figure. Let's see. Some questions about... there are many different questions about how to scale these up. And that's one of the things that I have been thinking about and that I'm hoping to get your ideas on. So one of the tricky things about these sparklers is that, especially Actually, not for all the variations of a Senko Hanabi sparkler, because the actual powder is completely burnt before the effect starts. It's really difficult to scale the reaction up, because by the time you get to this stage where you have the molten drop, let me get that close to the microphone. By the time you get to this stage where you have the molten drop at the tip of the sparkler, all the powder is gone. And so there's no way to provide additional energy to that little ball of fuel, except to allow it to react with atmospheric oxygen. And that means that there's a surface area thing going on. If you guys have heard of the square cubed law, where if you increase the size of a three-dimensional object, its surface area does not increase nearly as quickly as its volume. And so, say you take a sphere and you increase it from this diameter, like a beach ball. Say it starts at this diameter to this diameter. Well, that may only be about twice the diameter, but the volume has increased by, I don't know, 15 times or something. And what we're relying on in a Senko Hanabi is for the surface area of the outside of the molten drop to react with air. And if you have too much internal volume, that external surface area is not going to be able to provide enough heat to keep the inside molten and reacting. And so you end up with this conundrum where scaling this up is really difficult, because it's hard to provide enough air to this reaction when it's a larger size. There's really a very small limit. There's a really small limit of you can't scale this reaction up very easily at all. But I'd love to hear your ideas for doing so, because this composition for fireworks being completely non-flammable is really novel. And it would be really awesome if we could come up with different types of fireworks that could be made so safely as these. Like the powder itself can be used to extinguish fires. That it couldn't be safer. And so, yeah, if there were other fireworks that could be made besides Senko Hanabi with a similar composition, it would just be amazing. It'd be so cool. And it would open up fireworks as being something that could legitimately and safely basically be made in classroom laboratories. Like, how much more interested would kids be in science and chemistry if they could make real fireworks, even these sparklers, in the classroom? If you could sit down, explain a chemical composition, and then, like, set kids at it in the lab, with adult supervision, of course, mixing different ratios of sulfur and carbon and bicarbonates to see who can get the best firework reaction. That is a way to get kids interested in science. And I'm just really excited about these sparklers and their potential for that purpose, for getting kids interested in science in something that is really spectacular and, safe to make at home. Of course, there's some danger. There's still some danger with an open flame and something that emits sparks as a sparkler does. But the danger of making fireworks, the actual manufacturing process of these, is completely obliterated. There's no danger in the powder, except for maybe, I don't know, inhalation of the dust, I guess, would be something to pay attention to. Yeah, so give me your ideas for how to scale these things up, or how to get oxygen into these dross balls without letting the molten dross falling off the end of the sparkler. Let's see. Someone says, one thing that interests me, Pavel Krill, I think is how you, I hope I didn't mispronounce your name. One thing that interests me is would soaking the paper with, for example, calcium chloride solution be able to turn the sparks a different color? So we saw that a little bit with the bicarbonate, so let me bring some of these papers back out, and I'm going to roll, as we're talking here, I'll roll some more of the paper type sparklers. We did see a new color with the bicarbonate variation. We saw a very bright yellow. I'm sorry, I keep saying bicarbonate variation, but they're both bicarbonate variations. What I mean is the baking soda, the sodium bicarbonate variation, we do see a new color. We see a much more yellow color with this baking soda variety than the orange color of the potassium variety, which is also more in line. The orange color of the potassium variety is more in line with the traditional Japanese Senko Hanabi, whereas the yellow color is something new. However, it's pretty difficult to change the color to something besides the bright yellow of these baking soda sparklers, because these sodium in baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, is really something special in terms of its color emittance. The yellow color that the yellow color that sodium emits is one of the most vibrant chemical colors that is possible. It is absolutely bright yellow, and there's not very many other chemicals that make a color this vibrant. And so changing the color to something other than this yellow color, I mean, that's really spectacular. This yellow color is a spectacular color in fireworks. You don't see that very often. But it's difficult to choose a different color than this. Uh-oh, dropped it. Dropped the dross ball. So anyways, changing the color of these sparks can be done to yellow or an orange. Let me bring you down here. This is still going, and it's kind of interesting. I've never seen a drop on the table actually last that long. You can see why you don't want to do this over a surface that you care about. A wooden table like this is not at risk of catching fire or anything like that. But I'm definitely going to have marks on my table after this video that I didn't have before, and that's okay because this is a filming table that I have specifically for beating up. But yeah, so the you can change the color of these, but I only know how to do it to yellow. Others mentioned at the very start of this stream about switching in other types of metal bicarbonates like strontium, which would make red, or barium, which would make green. However, doing that is not possible because strontium and barium's sulfides, because in this Senko Hanabi reaction, you're creating a chemical reaction between the sulfur and the whatever the metal bicarbonate is. So baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, reacts with sulfur to make sodium sulfide. Potassium bicarbonate reacts with the sulfur to make potassium sulfides. And if those sulfides are not able to melt at fairly low temperatures, then it won't be possible to make into a Senko Hanabi because the sulfides will solidify and your molten drip on the end of the sparkler will freeze and turn solid. Turns out barium and strontium sulfides and sulfates are they do not melt until an extremely high temperature. And so I tried making Senko Hanabi with those ingredients, and it just did not work. The drips, I could get the drips to melt initially, and then they would just quickly freeze before they made any sparks. So yeah, sadly, it's hard to change the color to anything other than yellow or orange, as the traditional sparklers are. I'll keep reading here. Let's see. Yeah, the ball falling off is pretty anticlimactic. It is too bad when the ball falls off of these sparklers, but that is part of the process, and it is, I don't know, the difficulty in making these is just a big part of what makes them so fun to make. I mean, I know that they are just sparklers, and a lot of people, no matter how much I talk about how unique they are and how cool it is that they make their sparks basically like a glass of bubbling soda, a lot of people will just see it's a sparkler. What's the big deal? But man, when you try to make them, it's just so cool. You realize what an art these things are. And they're just absolutely mesmerizing. Let's see. All right, I'm going to catch up to the more recent comments. What happens if you drop the molten ball of this stuff in water? Do you get a nice bead? No, you do not. The liquid will quickly dissolve in water. It'll turn the water very dark black with all the sulfides and stuff that are, and the charcoal that is in this mixture. Yeah, it just dissolves. However, some of the scientific experiments on these sparklers, which there have been many because they have such a unique means of producing sparks, there have been a lot of studies to see what the heck is going on with these things. If you actually take these sparklers and you get them ignited, and then you dip them into an inert atmosphere, like pure nitrogen or something, where there's no oxygen in the air to burn with them, they will stop reacting. And so you do get a solid bead if you get them started and then dip them into an inert atmosphere so that the reaction stops. And then you could actually restart that again by lighting, applying more heat. Someone is asking about more details about how to make the Senko Hanabi scoop. So let's move over to this camera here. So I covered it a little bit earlier in the video, but this is just a square rod, a square dowel rod. And I drilled a hole in the base to insert an aluminum tube. So at hardware stores in the US, there's often a little section with various odds and ends, little metal parts, tubes and wires and things like that that are kind of made for like crafts. And you can probably actually find tubes like this at a craft store. And so I took this to a sander or maybe a file, and it was a tube, and I just filed away part of the tube, and you end up with a nice little scoop that you can close the back of with some hot glue and then coat it in candle wax in order to make it non-stick. And so that is how you make a fancy little scoop like this in a sort of Japanesey looking style. And then, so definitely something that I do not mention, very often in my main channel videos is that I have an email address available on the information page of my channel, which is meant for people to send me video responses. If you have tried any of my projects before, make sure that you take a video of them, post that to YouTube, and then send me a link, because I would love to take your clips and feature them in a playlist on my channel homepage. Years and years ago, probably 15 years ago, there used to be a feature on YouTube called video responses. I think TikTok now has something similar to this, where you can actually reply to a video with a video of your own. YouTube used to have that, and I miss that feature so much. Being someone that did DIY projects on YouTube, having viewer feedback where they are like actually trying what I'm demonstrating and then posting a video and saying, hey, this worked, this didn't, man, that made the YouTube community feel tight. And I would love to have that interaction with you guys again. So I've tried to recreate that over the years by having a video response playlist that you guys can send me links, and I'll feature them on my channel homepage and probably leave you a comment or at least a like on your video. Yeah, I just love interacting with you guys, and yeah, it's just the best. By the way, if any of you have contact with the slow-mo guys, I've been trying to get in contact with them to film these sparklers for a long time. I think that would be really fun. So, yeah. Let's see here. More comments. Guillotined Chemistry is in here. That is Mark. Guillotined Chemistry is one of my Senko Hanabi buddies, one of the fellow addicts of this hobby. You tend to really get into these sparklers once you start making them because there's just so many things to tinker with. Guillotined Chemistry has some awesome videos. He is one of the other very few masters of the Senko Hanabi craft in the United States. So check out his channel, especially if you're interested in different paper types and pursuing the more traditional types of Senko Hanabi papers, like Gampi papers and various rice papers from Japan. He is the guy to talk to about those papers. Have I tried the grass version with the traditional mix? I have, but it was years ago. So I have tried the stick type Senko Hanabi with an oxidized mixture, but it's been a while. Most of my efforts have been focused on the bicarbonate-based version of Senko Hanabi in recent years because these are safe and just absolutely nothing. There's nothing legally to complain about with these. As far as making them and storing them, there's no pyrotechnic composition, nothing that actually counts as a firework composition in these. And in fact, they would pass the compositions that are used in these bicarbonate-based versions of sparklers. I've spoken to a fireworks consultant on this, and they would pass the national standards for flammability with flying colors. They would not even count as a flammable substance. And so just for legality reasons and safety reasons, these bicarbonate-based versions are just so easy to make, and they're just as spectacular as the ordinary combustible types. Actually, I take that back. I have worked on the combustible types a couple of years ago in my video about multivariable testing. I did a experiment doing tests with the combustible versions of these sparklers to see if I could improve those results. If you haven't seen my video on multivariate testing, you really got to check it out. That is one that I think is, as far as my videos go, that's one of my favorites, and I might do a follow-up on that in the coming months because I just touched the tip of the iceberg about how to test multiple variables at once in an experiment, which gives you just amazing insight into the things that you're testing, and more people need to know about it. I'm just lighting here another one of these baking soda variety Senkos. Bright yellow flame. And by the way, we are way outside the notes that I had for this video. If you missed the earlier part of this stream, it was a bit more organized early on as I was demonstrating the different techniques for making these sparklers. At this point, it's we're just having fun. Boy, that is... These baking soda Senkos are just so different from the potassium variety. They're a little bit less spectacular as far as, I should say they're less long-lived, but they're just as spectacular. And in a different way. The sparks are just so gentle. I need to make another one of those and hold it closer to the microphone just so you guys can experience how beautiful the sound is from these baking soda Senko Hanabi. Here, I'll give you a close-up. I'll give another close-up of the rolling technique so that you can, I don't know, for those who didn't get enough earlier. This is an image that you'd never see in normal normal fireworks manufacture, or maybe you would have seen it like, I don't know, in like a Middle Ages photograph or something of a candle flame behind someone working on fireworks. But I can do this because the composition is non-flammable, and as I've said several times already, do not do the things that I'm showing in this video if you are working on actual fireworks that are using ordinary fireworks compositions. This is a special circumstance where these sparklers use a composition which is completely non-flammable and safe to use even around an open flame. Unbelievably, but it's true. Just a perfect wire stem. Stiff enough. This is one of the tests here. One of the tests here to know if you have rolled these correctly is if the sparkler can support its own weight. By holding it, about midway through the sparkler, it should still be stiff. And you need the torch flame to light this. Bring it right up close to the microphone. Just a beautiful sound. I have to blow out the candle because I keep holding my hand over it. Oh man. All right, let's read. Yeah, someone said the loose paper is near the flame is more dangerous. That's actually that's actually something that I've said about these sparklers before. Is that the actual composition that makes the sparks is less flammable than the paper it's rolled in. It's amazing. I'm just reading comments here and seeing how what I can reply to here. Someone says they have my airsoft minigun that I made way back. That I used to make a lot of airsoft videos. Yeah, so I do need to make another video about the multivariate testing. I might have a yeah, I have to come up with the right project with that. Yeah, someone else suggested that I should talk to Destin from Smarter Every Day about these sparklers. I have before. I'll have to reach back out to Destin. I've talked to him a few times, and I would love to have him on board to do a slow motion video. I was kind of saving that until those of you who missed earlier in the stream. I've been trying. I've made several attempts in the past to launch Senko Hanabi products, either kits or I even made these. These sparklers, which I thought about actually selling, directly as in their current state as sparklers. It's very confusing to figure out what to actually put on the label of these sparklers, because they're not actually flammable, but according to U.S. regulation for sparkler labeling, you have to say "caution flammable" on the packaging. Yeah, I was waiting to reach out to Smarter Every Day about these sparklers at a certain point before I launched products, either kits to make them or like the sparklers themselves for sale. But I think that it's just too complicated of a product. Making a product to sell is so hard, you guys. It's like there's so many hoops you have to jump through. The manufacturing process itself is just unbelievably expensive and complicated to figure out. You have to figure out who the heck is going to ship this stuff for you. It's just really difficult. And I think that these sparklers are just too difficult of a product to make as the first product I ever go to market with. And add to that the fact that this is a type of sparkler that has never been seen before in the world as a commercial product, and I would have to fight an uphill battle to convince regulators that these are actually non-flammable fireworks. Like, in fact, they're not even. Speaking to a consultant about this, they shouldn't even classify as fireworks at all. But it would be an uphill battle to convince the regulators that that is the case. So, yeah. Anyways, that is what I. That is something that I was thinking about before reaching out to Destin of Smarter Every Day, but yeah, I think that ship might have sailed, and so we might see some slow motion action of these sparklers sooner than later. Although I know many of you are not as into these sparklers as I am, and are more here for the radiative cooling series or various other projects, and so I don't want to get people fed up with my my very peculiar firework obsession. Yeah, let's see. Very Berry Carey asks, I'm curious, where did you first see Senko Hanabi, or how did you first get interested? Like, was it a research rabbit hole or a travel discovery or question mark? Yeah, so my first interest, and the thing that actually got me started on this YouTube channel way back in early 2007, was I joined YouTube in order to share my clips of making fireworks, my homemade fireworks, on various pyrotechnic forums. And in early 2007, there were very few websites that would allow you to actually upload a video for streaming. And like, I had my own website, and I talked to the web host, and I was like, hey, what would it cost to get my website enabled for video streaming? And I basically got laughed at. No one was doing that back in early 2007. It was too expensive. And YouTube suddenly allows video streaming. And I'm like, hey, suddenly I have a way to show off all of my homemade fireworks stuff on all these pyrotechnic and chemistry forums. And actually, it's pretty funny. Styropyro, the laser guy on YouTube, he was on the same firework forums I was, and we knew each other back then, talking about crazy fireworks stuff. And so when I saw him at Open Sauce this last year, that was some good memories of being on amateur pyrotechnic forums together. But yeah, so I've always had an interest in fireworks since I was a little kid, and that's how I started off growing my firework and chemistry knowledge. And so I read articles from pyrotechnics journals and magazines, and one of them mentioned someone who was an author of many of these articles, and he starts off this one article by saying, I usually joke that I have either made or attempted to make every single type of firework there is. But now someone came up to me and presented me with these little sparklers that I had never even heard of before. And they were Senko Hanabi. This was back in 2000, probably early 2007 as well. And through the Skylighter forum, I believe, or the Skylighter newsletter or something, this firework expert, who I looked up to and tried replicating a lot of different fireworks through his resources, said he'd never even heard of these sparklers before. And so anything that someone like that has not heard of before really gets my attention. And then it also caught my interest as soon as I learned what these were. It really caught my interest that I had never seen anything like them. Let me go back to an earlier clip here, for those of you who showed up to the stream late. The way that these fireworks actually create sparks is the same way that seltzer water shoots those little droplets up your nose that irritate you when you're drinking a ginger ale or whatever. And I didn't know that at the time. And so, like, the way that these sparklers actually created their sparks was just an absolute mystery to me. Like, how does a liquid drop? First of all, how do these things create sparks? How do these things create sparks when the powder is gone by the time they actually ignite? I think this is a, let me just ignite this one here. I think this is a standard Senko Hanabi. Yeah, so here's a standard variation Senko Hanabi. And the powder in the sparkler is all being burned away right now. Right now, all the powder is gone, and the show hasn't even started yet. How does this thing make sparks when the powder has already been burned? This is just like ash here, like a molten drop of ash making these sparks. How in the world does that work? What a weird sparkler. And I, of course, was not able to make them near as good as this 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, I was able to understand how they worked well enough to know that I did not understand how they worked. And that is something, like a puzzle like that. And that these are so small. The other thing I really like about these is that you get such a big effect and such a long-lasting effect from like a little bit of, like, the size of a housefly in powder. Like, just the tiniest amount of powder gives you such an enormous effect. It's just a really economical firework to make. It's such a mystery, and the challenge of it just turned it into an obsession. Yeah, but anyway, I learned about it in a pyrotechnic journal 18 years ago, probably, early 2007. And yeah, this is how I got my taste for chemistry, and how I have grown today to what I know now, just experimenting with things like this. Let's see here. I'm going to scroll down. I'm scrolling back down through the comments to see, just seeing what else anyone has talked about. And of course, we are just kind of hanging out now. This has been a long live stream, and now we are at the point in it where I think anyone that hung around this long doesn't mind just hanging out and doing things a little disorganized and seeing what happens. Still here for the radiative cooling sparkler. Here for the radiative cooling sparklers, someone says. Almost. That's almost. I don't think that'll be one of my upcoming videos. Yeah. I am not building shells anymore. I basically have stopped making large fireworks because I have so many other projects. This channel this channel keeps my hands plenty full of hobbies that are, you know, actually my job at this point. And yeah, I don't build many fireworks anymore because it's too risky of a subject to make YouTube videos about. And it's difficult to stay within the regulations. It's just too much red tape, even though it technically can be done legally in the United States. I am content with Senko Hanabi, and I have way too many other projects like the radiative cooling series and who knows what else, keeping my hands full. Let's see. Someone Someone asks if I can share every formula for Senko Hanabi somewhere. No, probably not, because most of them are bad. I can share the ones that I have come up with. I'll give you guys another look at my paper here. Switch over to this camera. So this is a worksheet that I actually wrote out about making Senko Hanabi. Here's a very simple recipe that uses pretend you didn't see that. So this is a recipe for actually combustible Senko Hanabi. Do not make this using the don't make this recipe using the processes shown in this video, because it would be dangerous. You cannot use the techniques I've shown in this video safely with the combustible variation of Senko Hanabi. So here are some of the working mixtures of the non-flammable bicarbonate-based versions. So we have, sorry, I'm touching the microphone with the paper. We have potassium hydrogen carbonate. That's the chemical formula for potassium bicarbonate. That's 4 parts, 2 parts sulfur, 0.5 pine char, and 0.25 lampblack, and that is Zoltri's mix. Zoltri is another YouTuber who perfected this recipe using vegetable oil lampblack. Very good recipe. This is my mixture I came up with using commercially available lampblack, which I bought from Etsy. You might be able to find this somewhere, but it's not as good as making your own oil lampblack and making this, but it is a viable recipe, which actually is the one that I demonstrated in my earlier video, where I first showed off these non-flammable Senko Hanabi sparklers. And then the final recipe which is worth mentioning uses baking soda. I guess I don't have that on this sheet, but I have it on this one here. So this sheet here is the recipe for the baking soda Senko Hanabi. So sodium hydrogen carbonate, that is sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, 7 parts, sulfur 4 parts, charcoal 2 parts, and go back earlier in the video to see how to make charcoal in a form that will work well for these sparklers. So those are basically all of the powder recipes that I would recommend making in this bicarbonate mixture, and you can adjust them to your pleasure, really. There might be one more I can give you. Here's another one. So this is with charcoal only with potassium bicarbonate. So if you want a mixture without having to make lampblack, this is 1.6 parts potassium bicarbonate, 0.8 parts sulfur, and 0.3 parts charcoal. And you could simplify that ratio, I'm sure. But this is a fairly good potassium bicarbonate-based mixture that does not require the creation of lampblack. All right. Yeah, so there are all of my bicarbonate compositions. Let's see. Okay, so let's. We're switching topics a little bit, but I don't mind because we're just in the mess around part of the stream here. Someone is asking about my last video, my giant bubble video. Someone says, ever consider doing helium giant bubbles? A lot of people have asked about this. So my last video, if you missed it, it didn't get as many views as some of my earlier projects. So maybe some of you missed my last giant bubble video. We made very large bubbles, and I was having trouble keeping them off the ground. because they're so heavy when they get large, they have such a thick soap film that they fall. And so filling them with helium would be really interesting. It would take a lot of helium, a lot of helium to fill one of those bubbles. More interesting maybe are some of the suggestions that I've had to use warm air to fill the giant bubbles as they are formed. Have like some kind of warm air blower or heater behind me as the bubbles are inflating. Probably that will not work. I did actually try small scale tests of that, and warmed air caused the bubbles to pop really quickly. You need warmed air that is also humidified, and it actually takes a lot more energy to humidify air than it does just to warm it. And so, yeah, it's actually a tricky process. You would need like a bunch of boiling water or a million carpet steamers lined up to fill the bubbles with warm and humid air in order to have a result that actually that would actually work to make giant bubbles and make them float into the air. Okay, I'm not going to go off topic like that again. Actually, this for this video, we might do a live stream Q&A at some point, and then I can take more questions on different topics. Let's see. Would I ever sell batches of known good lamp black? Very Berry Carey asks. I don't know, maybe. It would have to be small quantities, and it'd be pretty expensive. I do have ways to make lamp black in larger quantities than just the little aluminum tray that we showed earlier, but not much larger quantities. I can maybe make it at 10 grams at a time or something, and for you to place an order, for you to want to place an order for like lamp black that's made in this way, I would think you'd want at least 2 or 3 grams, and I'd need to ask, I don't know, $15 a gram or something like that to make it worth my while to spend my time out in the backyard making lamp black for commercial sale. So probably I will never sell it, but if anyone else watching this wants to make lamp black, oil lamp black, and offer it for sale, you know, that check eBay. Maybe someone's already doing that. Pine or vegetable oil lamp black would work well for these sparklers. But really, this process of making it just using a disposable tin cup and a paper towel as a wick under these aluminum trays is a, I mean, that's pretty easy. So it seems like, you know, anyone that wants to make Senko Hanabi badly enough can, it's not going to be that much more challenging than making the sparklers themselves to just make the, make your own lamp black. Let's see. Do I prefer baking soda ones or the combustible ones? So the baking soda ones are the yellow ones. So there's baking soda, which is sodium bicarbonate, and potassium bicarbonate versions. Both of those are non-flammable, and I definitely do prefer those over the flammable versions. The sparks are actually bigger. You can make the drop larger without it falling off. For some reason, the liquid is stickier, and so it seems to cling to the paper stems more readily. And in that way, you can actually get a bigger effect from the non-flammable variation. And I prefer those simply because they're safer. And I can actually recommend people can make them themselves without risk of fire hazard during the manufacture. So definitely the non-flammable version is my preference. Although the flammable version is the traditional Japanese Senko Hanabi, and so I can't say that I still have a massive joy in lighting the traditional variety, and it doesn't take quite as much effort to actually ignite them. You can just, you know, put a soft flame to the tip of the paper, and the powder will burn all by itself and turn into that molten drop. Compared to these bicarbonate-based ones, you actually have to hold that torch flame to them for a while, and it doesn't feel like quite as meditative of a process of lighting these. I mean, it's still great, and it's totally worth the non-flammability, but there is still some magic in the traditional variation. I would just recommend not making those yourself. Definitely, it requires more expertise than I have demonstrated in this video or explained. I have not explained many of the safety hazards that would come along with making that variety. One of the key differences is that you cannot use steel ball bearings in a ball mill to mill powder for the flammable version of those sparklers. You have to use something called non-sparking media, such as lead or brass, because the composition could actually ignite if it were a standard firework mixture from ball bearings knocking into each other in the ball mill. So yeah, just a lot more safety considerations. You also would not want to make those just in any old workshop with flammable things around and all that stuff. So yeah, I have it's hard for me to pick a favorite, I suppose, if I brought it down to that. Maybe the flammable variation, the traditional Japanese Senko Hanabi. I mean, how can you not like the 300-year-old variety as they are, unchanged for hundreds of years? Even if the new variation is very good. Okay. Have I attempted to combine the sodium and potassium bicarbonate mixes? That's a good question. I've got that question quite a few times. Yes, I have tried to combine the baking soda and potassium bicarbonate mixtures, and it's the worst of both worlds. You don't get the color of the baking soda Senko Hanabi, that bright yellow. That's gone. And you don't get the sparks of the potassium bicarbonate variation. It's like a weird mix of the two that just isn't all that pretty. So I would stick with one or the other rather than mixing them. Although that would be a good experiment, because I've only tried about a 50-50 mixture. If you wanted to do some inventiveness, some invention, you could mix potassium bicarbonate based Senko mix with the baking soda variation, and maybe you'd come up with something that did look pretty cool. Let's see. Has any of the invention or creation you made been picked up for commercial uses? Have any of my inventions been picked up for commercial uses? Yes, some have, but not these sparklers so far. Not the bicarbonate-based versions anyways. And I'm a little bit hesitant. I actually did not share every secret that I have about these guys. There's one particular thing that about these stick-type sparklers that is non-critical for making them on a small scale. I said everything that was necessary for making these on a small scale, but on a large scale, there's one other thing that I don't want to really reveal because it wouldn't be useful to individuals, but it would be useful to bulk manufacturers that already make the paper variation of Senko Hanabi overseas and import them into Japan, which has put most of the native Japanese Senko Hanabi manufacturers out of business. And so I'm very cautious about information about commercializing these things because I want to not cause any detrimental effects to Tsutsui Tokimasa and the one other Senko Hanabi manufacturer that still remains in Japan. Like, they are keeping an art alive in its native land, and providing the wrong information to the wrong people could there's only one company in the world right now, Tsutsui Tokimasa, making these type of sparklers, and I don't want these to be replicated and imported the same as the paper type have to Japan, so that they have to also compete on this very rare niche sparkler, as well as the traditional Japanese paper Senko Hanabi. But other non-firework related inventions of mine have been picked up for commercial use. A few of them, I don't really want to bring up which ones at the moment. We'll keep it Senko Hanabi related for now. Let's see. Someone says to contact the PGI. Actually, I did the PGI is the Pyrotechnic Guild International. They are the largest international fireworks organization that hosts conventions and things full of people that actually make their own fireworks and display operators and things like that. And I actually did, through another organization, host a Senko Hanabi seminar a few years ago, giving away some of the tips that I did in this video. And but anyway, so yeah, I have been in talk with the fireworks organizations in the U.S. and elsewhere about these sparklers to get this knowledge to spread. I'll scroll back down again to the bottom. I just want to correct this. Someone mentioned that ceramic ball mill media are non-sparking. I wouldn't count on it. I would not use ceramic ball mill media. Just because someone mentioned it, I want to counter that because that could be dangerous information because ceramic materials can have a piezoelectric effect. So they don't actually make a spark by rubbing on each other like flint and steel would, but by contacting each other very hard, they could actually create an electric spark between ceramic balls, and that could cause an explosion if you were making traditional style fireworks that contain an oxidizer. Someone mentioned they just tried rolling one of these sparklers with random tissue paper they had sitting around, and yeah, you may as well, if you have strips of tissue paper, practice rolling these sparklers. See if you're any good at it, and see if you can figure it out. You can just scoop any kind of dirt or dust into them as practice. Yeah. Anyways, let's see here. An annual potato launcher build, please. Boy, I haven't made a potato launcher in some time, but I used to make quite a lot of those. Is there any reason why you can't use carbon black? Carbon black of vegetable origin has the number E152. Yes, there is a reason, and carbon black of the designation E152 is lamp black. Even though carbon black and lamp black are words that are often used interchangeably, E152 is basically charcoal made from coconut husks. And as I've mentioned, as we've been talking about lamp black, its origin and how it was actually made makes a big difference in its actual composition. It all looks the same. It all looks like just a dark black powder, but on the chemical level, they can be very different depending on how those carbon atoms arrange in molecular shapes. And yeah, it just doesn't work in the commercial varieties, and especially in that E number, the E152 number. I've looked into that. That's coconut husk charcoal, and yeah, it might work to replace charcoal in one of these recipes, but it won't work very well, and it definitely won't work in place of lamp black. Could you try making a paper one where you add a layer of dust after the tight twist, just a thin layer by dusting your left thumb and applying it as you twist? You know what? Let's do a little live experiment here. That was asked by Chris Quinn. And with the standard Senko Hanabi types, there are people that will... There have been kind of novelty Senko Hanabi that have been made that have more than one bunch of powder in the stem. So they'll take the initial scoop and put that in the paper. I'll switch over to camera 2 here. So they'll take the initial scoop of powder and put it in the paper like this. And then they'll put another scoop of powder further up the stem. So you get the initial reaction, big bursts of sparks, and the initial 4 stages of the sparkler. And then in that last stage, as it's burning up the stem, it will reignite the second bunch of powder, and you'll get the whole effect over again. The problem is that will not work with the bicarbonate-based version of these sparklers because there's not enough energy in that burning ember to actually melt a whole new pellet of this powder composition up the stem. Oops, I just I just messed up. We'll have to try that again. Yeah, the powder composition of these sparklers, being bicarbonate based, takes a torch flame in order to get them into that molten state, and so you can't have a second bunch of powder up the stem and expect it to automatically ignite when the ember reaches it. However, if we put just a tiny bit in there, maybe it would do something interesting. So let me start with, I'll start with the normal amount. Sorry, the frame rate on this camera that you're looking at me through right now is low because I wanted it to be low for when we're igniting Senko Hanabi to get that stop motion effect. Okay, so I've started to roll this sparkler, and I'm going to put, let's put just a little bit up here. I'm not going to sprinkle it in like gently over my thumb as the person suggested because it'd be a little hard to do that. But I'll put in just a little bit up here and see if that will reignite. Let's find out. I'll spread it out a little bit. This is the fun of doing things live, and this is really what we do on the Patreon live streams. We'll often just hang out and experiment together. If you would like to support me on Patreon, there is a link in the video description. Every time I mention Patreon in this channel, I feel like I really want to mention that if you are yourself financially struggling, I do not want you to support me on Patreon. I only want those who have extra income to consider supporting me. I don't want to put anyone at I don't want to be a financial burden on anybody who can't afford the support. It's for those who really appreciate these projects and have an extra income. Okay, so this sparkler, let's see, bring that camera up. So right about here, I think, is a little bit extra powder, so we'll see what the sparkler does when it gets up to that point. It might, the question is it going to self-extinguish? If I put too much powder, it's going to extinguish because it can't support. Ooh. It might still be, it might have gotten a little larger. I think we're definitely into the powder there. Yeah, we're starting to get a few branching sparks again. Maybe I could have put a little more powder in there and it would have branched even more. But it's definitely, the drip definitely grew a little bit. I was pretty shy about how much I was pretty shy about how much extra I put in that stem because I assumed it would go out, but that actually worked. So we could actually try a little bit more. Before I do that, I want to read more comments here. Let's see. Someone mentions glass marbles for ball milling media. No, don't do that. Also, a risk of piezoelectric effects. You could create electric sparks. So don't use glass media with pyrotechnic compositions. Let's see. Yeah. So for these sparklers, I do only generally put charcoal into the ball mill to make sure that that's ultra fine. So in that case, you could, well, I don't want to get into the other type of Senko Hanabi in this video. I want this to stay purely the non-flammable kind, but I do only grind the charcoal in the ball mill anyway. So that's okay. Let's see. If you're just if you're just jumping on, by the way, we ended the the planned part of this stream some time ago, and now I'm enjoying just hanging out with you guys and reading comments and talking it over. So this is what I enjoy doing on the live stream. On the when I live stream for Patreon, I love just hanging out and reading comments and seeing what you guys have to say. So the first half of this stream, I don't know how long we went while I was still on the planned segment, but that was yeah, we've long passed the time when I had a plan of what we were doing here. Someone asks, is that lava? Yeah, it basically is lava of a sulfur potassium sulfide composition, molten potassium sulfides, and here, let me I'm gonna play another while I'm reading comments. I'll play more of my media that I have prepared. I just got a new live streaming setup last week, which is what has given me the confidence to actually to actually jump on here. So I'm just going to play some of this footage while I'm reading comments here. But yeah, anyways, I'm not quite used to my live streaming setup, and I haven't worked on my live stage presence all that well, so I don't know. 320 of you are on. That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I just love that we're able to do this, and I really want to do this more. This is usually a Patreon perk to get these live streams, but occasionally, when I have something that I think is entertaining enough to warrant going onto the main channel, I might jump on here a little more often. Where do I... so anyone who's wondering about the details of where I get the paper, or like what charcoal to use or stuff like that, go back to the start of the video. That's what the whole start of the video is about, is going through all those details about making these sparklers. Yeah, someone is mentioning my thermoacoustic projects. I haven't gotten into that in quite some time. I kind of got distracted with other means of passive cooling rather than thermoacoustic stuff. Could you electronically heat the powder to make it sputter like that? To make it sputter like the Senko Hanabi, could you electronically heat it? Yeah, I have actually. So some of the research papers that have investigated these sparklers have they've investigated making this same effect without paper or a stick or any sort of support at all, and they just use like a metal wire or something like that to see if the effect still happens. And of course it did, by putting the composition on a metal wire. And so you could electronically heat this composition. You just still need to, in order to keep getting these sparks, you need to still maintain like some kind of ratio between the surface area of the molten drop and its actual like volume, I think. And so you would have to like spread it over a heated surface or something. There's a lot of things that need to be tried with this in order to find out under what other circumstances we can create sparks besides being in a ball shape on the end of a stick like this. A molten drop like this is one thing, but man, would I love to see this effect, this same kind of composition in other fireworks. Let's see. Yeah, someone is asking about Senko Hanabi sparklers being sold in the States, and they really are not sold in the States at all. At one point, someone was importing them not from Japan. They were importing them from a Chinese manufacturer, and I think that they just didn't come across the right way to an American audience. For one thing, you need to actually, you need to explain to an American how to use a Senko Hanabi sparkler, because if you just hand them one, they're going to light it upright like a wire sparkler, and that does not work. You have to hold them in a downward position, and you have to do it in still air, and it takes a certain level of patience that a lot of Western people do not have. We're used to taking our sparklers and writing our names in the air, swinging them around and stuff. You can't swing a Senko Hanabi around, or the drop will fall off. You have to be really careful with it and hold it very still in calm air. And so I just don't think they were the right thing for the American market at the time. I'm trying to turn that around with my videos, show the beauty of these sparklers and kind of get people on board to be interested in them. This one was kind of a dud. The stick type, as I mentioned, are not the ones that I've worked on the most. The paper type I've put a lot more work into perfecting. But yeah, I would love to see Senko Hanabi sold in the States as well. And if anyone wants to develop a kit for making them and jump through all the logistical hoops to get it manufactured and stuff, and I would be happy to maybe be a partner or something in that venture and advertise when it came time to it. But yeah, it's in my estimation, the best part about Senko Hanabi is learning to make them, learning the in-depth process to make these really delicate, really precise art form of a sparkler. And just the variation that you can give to these in terms of the composition, in terms of additives. One additive that I did not mention, Dr. Frederick Vandersipt, one of the researchers who spent a lot of time working on these sparklers, figured out that you could put a small amount of magnesium powder into the composition, like 1 or 2 flecks, like a single flake of pepper size worth of magnesium, and the magnesium, weirdly enough, will not burn right away as you ignite the sparkler. It stays insulated in the center of the molten drop, unreactive, not reacting with any of the air, just kind of hanging out there as a little fleck of molten magnesium inside the sparkler. And it doesn't affect the burn at all until the very end. And you can, at that point, there's a trick that you can do. You have to be careful doing it because you could touch the drop and burn yourself. But if you flick the drop off the end, you can get a shower of sparks. And if you've added a fleck of magnesium to the sparkler, it's actually a bright white flash of sparks. And so it's actually a really interesting thing to do because it doesn't affect the regular burn of the sparkler at all. But if you do this, instead of getting that flash of yellow sparks or whatever as you get from that, in that case, a baking soda variation of a Senko Hanabi, you get a bright white flash. And that's really cool. And so Yeah, it's just another variation on this that you can do that, yeah, and it's really bizarre that a flake of magnesium does not burn in the core of a Senko Hanabi. It just sits there waiting for that drop to be flicked off. It's amazing. Someone asked about if you were to melt a crucible full. Oh, and this is interesting. So what if you were to melt a crucible full of this composition and then bubble oxygen or CO2 through it? Interesting. I have no idea what would happen. Oxygen, I found, I made a video a while ago about using an oxygen generator, and I dipped a Senko Hanabi into a container full of a pure oxygen atmosphere, and it burned really bright and really quick. So it would definitely do something. That would be interesting to melt a crucible of this stuff. And I've tried that, like, I've tried melting basically a small crucible like this, a little metal dish full of this powder, but it just doesn't spark because it doesn't have enough surface area to react. But if you were to actually bubble oxygen through it, well, don't try that at home. I'll say that much. All right. And if you can smear the mixture over anything with a small enough surface area, you should be able to try a fancy but breathable shape like a wireframe dodecahedron or something. That's interesting. What if we took some of this powder in maybe the paste form like this, where we've mixed it with the gel to make these stick type Senko Hanabi, but we coated a wire mesh with it. Interesting. What if you did that? You coat the wire mesh, and then you hold the wire mesh over like a campfire, because getting it all warmed up at once would be very difficult. That's a good idea. I like that idea. I mean, it would take a lot of composition. It would be very difficult to... maybe I'd do that with the charcoal variations without the lampblack, because the lampblack is kind of a precious substance, and to use enough of it to actually coat a big wire mesh would be, it'd be expensive. But we could start with a cheaper variation of charcoal coated on a wire mesh. That's an interesting idea. Someone else. Yeah, liked my earlier videos on these sparklers. Thank you, everybody who has commented about enjoying my earlier videos. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys watching this stuff. I think that we are... Someone else mentioned Senko Hanabi journey never ends, and I have found that to be very much the case. Yeah. Man, it has been fun being on here live with you guys. I have never done this before on the main channel, and it is something I hope to do more of. I don't feel very good at it. I think that we did enough to I did enough to make this a useful video for Senko Hanabi. I don't know how many views it will get in an in-depth video on a very niche topic like this that is live and meandering. There's a reason why all these details were not included in my earlier scripted videos on the subject. But for a live stream, I'm going to call this a good first success. And I really, really appreciate all of you being on here with me. I just realized I can't really end the stream till I jump back on my computer here. There we go. Yeah. Give me ideas for what we should do for our next live stream. I think that I might have to jump back on here to do some more experiments when we have some kind of DIY project where it feels like the details can't be adequately covered in a short video. My PCM, the phase change material video, that might be a topic where I jump back on to actually make the materials live on this stream and be able to troubleshoot and answer questions. And I love when you guys actually are able to give me live feedback of what worked for you and what did not for the projects that you have tried. Thank you so much for watching, everyone who is on here. If you want more of this kind of thing, check out my Nighthawk and Light Extra channel. I film live streams for patrons only, but they do go live to the public on my Nighthawk and Light Extra channel once the videos that they reference have been released. And in that way, even if you don't have the money to support me, you can still see all of my live streams. You just can't see them live, and you can't see them maybe in the first month or two that after I've filmed them, because I'll still be working on the projects that are referenced in those videos, and I don't want to give spoilers. But yeah, you can see all the live streams whether or not you have the money to support me on Patreon. And if you do, and if you would like to support me and see more of me live in an even sloppier manner as this video was, we usually work on experiments that are not finished, and so they don't always go to plan, and we don't always get a satisfying ending to the streams over on Patreon, but we do have fun with it, and I really enjoy actually the process of working, doing my job in the workshop, inventing stuff, and having live input to help me along the way, and just being able to interact with you guys and feel like you're in on this too is really cool. So thank you so much for watching. Man, so much. I so appreciate you guys being on here, watching my videos, staying with me for almost 18 years on YouTube now, and being able to, man, do one of the coolest jobs in the world. And you guys give me the freedom to pursue things that I hope will be useful for the world, and if not, hopefully entertaining and a little bit educational. That's it. All right, I've meandered enough. Thank you, everybody. Wrapping this up. I'll see you next time.